Chapter 701, Staged Victory. Whether in the hearts of the Burning Legion or the demigods, the outcome of this war is irrelevant, as both sides are still in the stage of testing each other. After the demigods appeared, they only tormented the enemy slightly and cleared out some minor soldiers, but did not confront the truly powerful demons in the Burning Legion. For the Night Elves, however, this victory is undoubtedly significant and timely. They saw hope in despair and felt the selfless assistance from the demigods. Yet, Jared did not celebrate his victory with a loud shout like the others. He knew that this was just a small victory in a long war, and there was still a long way to go. We have always believed that the excellent Guard Captain Shadowsong can lead us to unite as one and jointly resist foreign enemies, Cenarius said. Are you talking about me? Jared Shadowsong asked, hurriedly shaking his head in denial. Master, you are exaggerating. I am just an ordinary officer. How can I take on this important task? Now I can stand commanding the troops here is just a matter of luck. Cenarius smiled slightly. Jared Shadowsong, you don't need to be overly modest. At this juncture, it is even more important for you to step forward. Tauren and other races have joined our ranks, but they need us to give them their due respect. Only when they see the sincerity and respect of the Night Elves will they sincerely fight alongside us. The war is not over yet, and the future of Azeroth is still full of unknowns and variables, and we need their strength. When Jared heard this, his shoulders dropped helplessly. He knew the arrogance of the elves. It would be impossible for them not to discriminate against foreigners without imposing orders. This important task belongs to him. He took a deep breath and said firmly, I will do my best to live up to your expectations, Master. Although I cannot guarantee any brilliant results, I can use my life to assure you that I will do everything I can. Cenarius nodded with satisfaction. Your words are enough, Captain Shadowsong. We believe you can lead us out of this predicament and usher in new hope. Jared straightened his back, with a firm light shining in his eyes. I will immediately start reorganizing the Resistance Army and let them appear on the battlefield with a new look. But Master, I have something to ask. How will the other demigods deal with the next situation? We will stay here, Cenarius said. Although the Legion was defeated this time, they will never give up. I am worried that they will come back soon, and the next attack will be more ferocious and cruel. I have not yet learned your name, brave Tauren warrior. Jared said, his eyes falling gently on the Tauren in front of him, his voice full of respect and curiosity. Behind him, the white deer Ataluo lowered his head gracefully and leisurely chewed the only clean green grass on the ground, adding a touch of vitality to this moment of tranquility. The Tauren warrior straightened his back, and his voice was low and powerful, like thunder in the wilderness. My name is Huon High Mountain, Commander Shadowsong. The warriors of the High Mountain tribe are always ready to obey your orders. Ethan Quaya told me that you are a trustworthy leader. Thank you for his trust. A warm current surged in Jared's heart. He was a little surprised and touched by the trust of this druid whom he had only met once. He nodded slightly and expressed his gratitude. Thank you for your support and kindness, but now was not the time to dwell on this. He paused and then said, but please call me Jared. The title Commander always makes me feel like an old man. As he said that, he revealed an easy and friendly smile. Huon's thick lips curved upward, revealing a simple and sincere smile. Okay, Jared. After saying that, Huon turned his head again and looked at the king of the forest, Cenarius, with eyes full of respect. Great Cenarius, it is my greatest honor to be able to see you here. Cenarius smiled and nodded in response. Hun, I have deep respect for your race. Your piety and reverence for Mother Earth are the precious wealth of Azeroth. Today, the world is suffering from an unprecedented disaster, and it needs your strong and powerful arms to protect us. Please, stay and fight side by side with us. I understand, Cenarius. Hun's voice was firm and powerful. I will obey Jared's command and fight for the future of Azeroth together with my compatriots. He held up the eagle's claw stained with the blood of demons, the spear of the wild gods. This weapon shone sharply in the sun, as if telling the story of its past brilliance and glory. With this weapon and his resolute gaze, Hun won the respect and trust of everyone present. Great, we have welcomed another powerful ally. Jared's joy was beyond words. He couldn't help but imagine how powerful they would be if more allies joined. After confirming that the demons had withdrawn, the demigods and the Tauren tribe also left one after another and set up camp near the elven army. As the demigods and other allies departed, other officers around Gerard dispersed under his arrangement to deal with various matters. This temporary commander could finally rest for a while. However, soon new people came to Jared's side. A group of priestesses walked slowly, wearing exquisite armor with the symbol of the Sisters of Elune, and the soft light of the moonlight flowed on them. Jared's eyes swept across these priestesses, and suddenly his gaze fixed on a tall priestess with a unique temperament. It was Maiev, his dear sister and one of the people he admired most. "You are leading the team, Maiev," Jared said in surprise, though he did not let this expression fall on his face. Maiev raised her head slightly, her eyes lingering on Jared for a moment before showing a look of surprise. She stepped forward, patted Jared's shoulder, and said, "When I heard that the commander needed an assistant proficient in magic, I never thought that person would be you, my brother. You really impressed me." Jared chuckled and scratched his head in embarrassment. "Well done, brother," Maiev continued. "Ethan joked before that if Star Eyes continues to fail, we will launch a coup and push you to the position of commander. Now it seems that we don't have to spend that much effort at all. This is really unexpected luck." "Maiev, don't always be so sharp," Gerard said, feeling a mix of deep love and helplessness for his proud sister. He couldn't help the thorn in his words. "It really surprises me that you can get along so harmoniously with a man. You seem to be full of respect for him, which is not like your usual style." I don't look down on men." Maiev was hurt by her brother's sudden revelation. Her cheeks flushed slightly, and she glared at Jared angrily before waving her hand violently and hitting him on the head. This commander, who had just commanded calmly on the battlefield and was chatting and laughing with the demigods, could only swallow his anger and dare not speak out. The guards around him cleverly averted their eyes and pretended not to see anything. Jared rubbed his sore head, feeling both dissatisfied with his sister and a little surprised. He noticed that Maiev's retort was, "I don't look down on men," instead of, "I don't admire him." This made him realize that his sister did have sincere respect for that man. Thinking that his sister had finally met someone of the opposite sex who could impress her, Jared couldn't help but feel a surge of complicated emotions. There was both pleasure at his sister's change and a hint of schadenfreude that she had met her match. He shook his head, throwing these distracting thoughts aside, and said seriously, "Okay, Maiev, we have more important things to deal with now. In the battle just now, many soldiers were injured, and many others are beset by an enemy's curse. I am in dire need of healing from fellow priests." After listening to her brother's words, Maiev restrained her anger. She knew this was a critical moment and that her personal emotions had to be set aside. She nodded and said seriously, "I understand, Gerard. I will immediately organize the sisters to carry out the rescue work." At that moment, the sound of rapid hoofbeats broke the silence. A rider on a vigorous black panther came galloping over, his voice urgent in the wind. "Where is the commander?" Jared frowned. Although he had repeatedly emphasized not to call him commander, the title seemed deeply ingrained in the hearts of the soldiers. Being interrupted at such a critical moment, an inexplicable anger surged within him. He turned around suddenly, intending to reprimand the rider. "You wait aside for me first, and then I will address you one by one." However, he suddenly closed his mouth and his eyes widened. He noticed that the rider was not an ordinary soldier or messenger, but a distinguished noble. The gold and agate jewelry on his shoulders shone in the sun, and the family crest on his chest armor highlighted his noble status. Jared was shocked. He had almost gotten angry at a noble. Fortunately, the nobleman didn't seem to care about his gaffe and just nodded slightly to express his apology to Gerard. Then he stood aside in silence, waiting for further instructions. To cover up his embarrassment and shock, Jared hurriedly turned away and continued to make arrangements for his sister Maiev. In addition, our allies also need the blessing and help of the moon god priests. Jared's eyes slowly swept among the priests and finally stopped on Maev. I implore you, while providing them with help, to also give them the respect they deserve. At the very least, we cannot let them feel any of our arrogance and contempt. Maev listened to her brother's words quietly, a strange light flashing in her eyes. She had once worried that this young brother would not be qualified for the role of commander, but now, seeing him standing in front of everyone and issuing commands with such a firm and powerful voice, she felt sincerely gratified and proud. Yes, Commander-in-Chief of the Army, Maev said teasingly. Seeing her brother's face turn red with embarrassment, she nodded with relief. It seems that Ethan does have some sense, and you did have a decent manner when giving orders. Then she turned to look at the priest Gia next to her. Let's go, Gia. Our task is still very difficult, and there are many people waiting for us to save. Chapter 702, Ethan Returns. Jared watched Maev's retreating figure, and a complex emotion surged in his heart. He took a deep breath, turned to face the noble, and with a hint of apology in his tone said, Sir, please forgive me for my previous gaffe. However, the noble waved his hand, interrupting him, and said in a calm voice, My matters are not important. I saw you arranging for the treatment of the foreign mage just now. I am the Lord of the Black Forest. He paused and looked at Jared sharply. Who are you? Jared Shadowsong, my lord, Jared replied, feeling a little uneasy. Despite the changing times, he still couldn't help but feel awe when facing the nobles. It had taken 10,000 years for the Night Elves to gradually develop into a society without aristocratic classes. Oh, it turns out to be Commander Shadowsong. There was a hint of relief in the Lord of the Black Forest's tone. I am very glad that you did not encounter misfortune with Lord Star Eyes. Someone told me that you were still trying to save him at the last moment. Sir, Jared began to explain, but was interrupted again by the Lord of the Black Forest. I want to regroup our troops. Star Eye's strategy was obviously flawed, and we paid a heavy price for it. The Moon Goddess will surely forgive us for our mistakes, but we can't let more soldiers sacrifice themselves needlessly. We need to devise better strategies for the challenges ahead. I believe you think so too. You must still want to continue commanding the army, right? Jared was silent for a moment, then nodded instinctively. He knew well that he shouldered important responsibilities and could not live up to the trust and expectations of the soldiers. Seeing this, the Lord of the Black Forest nodded gratefully to Jared. In his opinion, the previous mess was entirely caused by Star Eyes and a group of unlearned nobles. Jared taking over this mess was truly commendable. Since you have agreed, I will redeploy the army in my camp, the Lord of the Black Forest said, turning around and mounting his steed. I will regroup the remaining soldiers to discuss the next action plan. He nodded to Jared again, then activated his lightsaber and flew away. It seems that you are about to embark on a journey to great success. A familiar voice suddenly echoed in Jared's ears. He turned his head and saw Ronan's smiling face. Ronan's eyes flashed with appreciation for Jared, and he said slowly, Ethan Couillet is indeed right. Your heroic performance this time not only reversed the situation of the war, but may have saved the entire world. Hearing Ronan's praise, Jared's cheeks suddenly lost their luster. He shook his head like a rattle and argued eagerly. Master Ronan, you are exaggerating. I am not a commander. I just fight to survive. Your efforts and contributions cannot be ignored. Because of you, I and many others can survive. Ronan waved his hand gently, indicating that Jared did not need to be modest. Star Eye has left us. I feel sad for him, but from the perspective of the Elven army, there is nothing to be sad about. I am happy to see that some nobles have regained their senses and started to rethink strategy and direction. This may be our hope to get out of the predicament. Do you really think I should go see them? Jared was silent for a moment, imagining the Black Forest and other nobles surrounding him, staring at him, and then asked hesitantly, Master Ronan, I am just a guard officer from Suramar City. You are no longer just a guard officer, Ronan interrupted him, looking at him firmly. Your performance has proven that you have higher potential and ability. Now you need to face the situation bravely. Embrace a new identity and a new challenge for yourself. I believe you can do well. Ronan's words were like a ray of morning light, penetrating the fog in Jared's heart and dispelling his confusion. Indeed, he thought, perhaps it was time to step up and embrace his new role. He was no longer the unknown guard officer in Suramar City, but a commander who stood at the forefront of history, bearing a heavy responsibility. So he set out, and as Luo Ning had said, his status remained unshaken by the controversy and doubts in the Black Forest camp. On the contrary, he stood like a tenacious oak tree in the storm, not falling, showing his true self. In the previous war, Jared faced the test of fate. He knew very well that he could not stand aside and issue rash and ignorant orders. No matter how humble his origins, he had to make the right decisions with wisdom and courage. The survival of countless lives and the future of the elven community hung in his hands. And the result was that he succeeded. He completed the trial and proved his courage and wisdom. How could he, who personally commanded and won a war, be refuted by a group of people who could only talk on paper? When a nobleman rashly proposed a flanking maneuver strategy, Jared's heart sank. He clearly saw the flaw and fatality of this plan. It would plunge the entire elf army into chaos and could even lead to their annihilation. So he stood up without hesitation and explained the danger of this plan to the noble and everyone present with a firm and powerful voice. His words were like a sharp sword, cutting through false illusions and pointing directly at the reality of the battlefield. His explanation was so profound and simple that even the most knowledgeable wise men among the elves could not help but nod in agreement. As he narrated, the truth of the war situation gradually became clear, and his words instilled an inexplicable sense of comfort and strength in everyone. Jared's resourcefulness and courage won the respect and trust of all the nobles. They were impressed by his talent and became his loyal followers. It was as if someone was born to be a master of strategy, and Jared was the wise leader in their hearts, leading them to victory. While Jared successfully stabilized the chaotic situation, Ethan finally ended his journey to recruit allies and returned to the ranks of the resistance. Then he heard a piece of news that surprised him. During the previous thrilling counterattack, Tyrande mysteriously disappeared. According to eyewitness accounts, Tyrande was on the front lines, racing against time to provide emergency medical aid to injured night elves. However, at this critical moment, the demon army suddenly broke through the nearby defense line and surged in like a scourge. At this critical moment, a strange-looking demon suddenly appeared. He had double horns on his head, and his legs were a pair of hooves, making him look evil and bizarre. He was the demon secretly transformed by the spirit, Sani. This satyr was none other than Ashara's #1 traitor among the Night Elves, the court favorite Xavius. He took advantage of the chaos, kidnapped Tyrande, and disappeared into the chaotic battlefield. When Archdruid Malfurion and the demigods returned to the Resistance and learned the news, they were furious. Malfurion was even more indignant and expressed his intention to rescue Tyrande himself. He left the base camp of the Resistance without hesitation and went to the vanguard outpost in Zin Ashari alone. The person who conveyed this disturbing news to Ethan was a night elf girl named Chandris Feathermoon. She was still young, seemingly under 100 years old. For the long-lived night elves, she was still just a minor. She was an orphan adopted by Tyrande in Suramar City, her parents having been sacrificed by demons. After being adopted, she had been following Tyrande like a shadow, becoming her loyal little follower. Before returning to the rebel camp and preparing to embark on a journey to find the Tauren, Ethan and Chandris had many interactions. They got along quite well with each other. Although in Ethan's eyes, Chandris was just a young and energetic girl, in Chandris's heart, Tyrande was a woman who could be her mother. Her admiration and dependence on Tyrande almost surpassed her feelings for anyone else. According to young Chandris, she chose to reveal the news to Ethan because, deep down, she felt that Ethan was more suitable for Tyrande than the Archdruid Malfurion. Malfurion is so boring, Chandris frowned, a look of dissatisfaction on her face. He is always frowning all day long, as if he is the only one who is in danger in the whole world. It seems like people care. When she mentioned the Archdruid, her resentment seemed to find an outlet, and she continued, "Isn't it just that a group of demigods were recruited as reinforcements? So what? It mainly depends on the power of Lord Cenarius." "That's right. He always acts like he's great, which is really unbearable. Chandris pouted in dissatisfaction, her lips forming a small pout as if she could hang an oil bottle on it. She glanced at Ethan and continued, "Obviously, he can't compare with you when it comes to his contribution to the resistance. But when she was with him, Miss Tyrande almost never smiled. But when she is with you, Miss Tyrande smiles every day, like a blooming flower." Chandris's idea was naive and simple. In her opinion, whoever could make her adoptive mother Tyrande laugh would be her adoptive father. Although the logic was a bit naive, it also revealed her deep feelings for Tyrande and her desire for a happy life. In addition, when she learned that Ethan was going to rescue Tyrande, Chandris made a condition without hesitation. I'm going to rescue Miss Tyrande with you." Chapter 703, Military Camp Discussion. After listening to Chandris's narration, Ethan couldn't help but fall into deep thought. He had to lament the inertia of history, or to be more precise, Sarvis's persistence. The plan to capture Tyrande and present her to Queen Ashara was meticulously planned and resolutely executed by Xavius. Of course, Ethan also wanted to rescue Tyrande, not only because of the oracle sent by Elune, but also because of the deep friendship between him and Tyrande. However, he was not overly worried like Malfurion. He knew very well that Tyrande, as the chief elector of Elune, was always protected by the power of the moon god. This power, much like the colorful clouds described in Journey to the West, allowed Tyrande to avert any danger. Those demons and highborn elves who wanted to harm Tyrande were simply engaging in wishful thinking, let alone imprisoning her. With the power of the moon god, even touching her would be as difficult as climbing to the sky. The only thing they could do was imprison Tyrande in a dungeon and try to force her to submit by depriving her of food and water. However, how could Ethan miss an opportunity like a hero saving a beauty? After all, Tyrande was the girl he liked, and he couldn't let Malfurion steal the spotlight. More importantly, the chance to capture the heart of a future leader of the strongest race of Azeroth was not something that came often. Just as Ethan was deep in thought, wondering how to rescue Tyrande from the clutches of the devil, a figure quietly approached. The natural aura flowing from the other person was like a spring breeze blowing through the forest, allowing Ethan to instantly recognize a fellow druid. "Senior Ethan?" A clear voice broke the silence. The young druid approached with a hint of restraint and respect. He came to deliver a message. "Commander Jared invites you to the main camp to discuss matters." Usually, an ordinary guard would be sufficient to deliver a message. This time, a druid was sent out of respect for Ethan. "Senior Ethan?" Ethan was slightly stunned, a little surprised by this sudden title. The doubt in his eyes disappeared fleetingly, replaced by a gentle smile. "Okay, I'll be there right away. Thank you for your hard work." "You are." The young druid seemed a little shy. He rubbed his nose and said in a childish voice, "Salandra, my name is Salandra Ling, and I am a second-generation druid." As he said that, he looked up at Ethan with a burning light in his eyes. "I heard that you are the first druid to understand the power of nature without relying on anyone's guidance, right? The firebird you transformed into is real. That's so cool. How did you do it?" His words were full of admiration and curiosity for Ethan. The druid group, including Malfurion and even the demigod Cenarius, were full of curiosity about him, a druid outside the system. After all, the Night Elf druids had a complete inheritance and system, and Ethan was like an alternative existence. His existence was not only a challenge to the mainstream druid order, but also a possibility for exploration. This uniqueness attracted the attention of Tyrande and many druids. Malfurion, who was inspired by the forest demigod Cenarius, was known as the great mentor of all druids. Under his personal guidance, the first generation of druids came into being. The second-generation druids were the apprentices carefully trained by the first-generation druids, who were recognized and trained by Malfurion. The young Salandra Ling in front of him was one of the best. His mentor was Fandral Stagelm, a name that would become infamous as a fire druid and traitor to the Night Elves in the future. However, at this time, he remained loyal to his beliefs and mission. Yes, it was the Fandral in Ethan's memory, the Night Elf traitor who would become the first fire druid in the future. Of course, it might not be fair to judge Fandral by future events. After all, With Ethan, an unexpected variable, joining Azeroth, the future direction had become confusing. No one could predict what changes lay ahead. In short, in the eyes of other druids, if someone claims to be able to master the art of druidry without relying on anyone's teaching, it is undoubtedly nonsense, and no one will believe it. After all, even geniuses like Malfurion had followed Cenarius for a long time and received personal instruction from the demigod through words and deeds, and it took them a long time to become great druids. However, Ethan's existence breaks this routine. There is indeed no record of him within the druid group, but the testimonies of many witnesses, such as Lasal Raza, have proven that he does have the ability to use druid spells. His unique phoenix transformation is even more amazing. This skill is obviously not something that their group can teach. So far, the druids among them can only transform into giant eagles, hippogriffs, and storm crows. No one can match Ethan's transformation state, akin to a phoenix's nirvana. This is enough to prove that Ethan is indeed not from their system. Ethan dealt with Salandra's various questions while following her forward and soon reached the land of electricity. Salandra politely reported loudly to the tent, "Commander Jared, I have brought Master Ethan." Jared's gentle and low voice came from the tent. "Well, thank you for your hard work. Please let him in." Following Salandra's guidance, Ethan entered the camp. He first looked around, his eyes lightly scanning everyone. Several people with different expressions gathered around Jared, studying the map on the table attentively, exchanging opinions among themselves in low voices. Maev, the temporary leader of the Sisterhood, was also among them, and her expression looked extremely serious. After spotting Ethan, the battle priest winked at him, causing Ethan to feel dazzled for a moment. This female Tyrannosaurus actually also shows her playful side. At this moment, a well-known and burly night elf slammed the table, breaking the tranquility of the air. He was half a head taller than the average person of his race, and his grass-green hair fluttered in the wind. In addition to the feathered leather armor buckled on his shoulders, the strong muscles of his upper body shone in the sun, looking extremely strong and very natural. "With all due respect, Commander-in-Chief," the night elf said in a resolute tone, "although your steady strategy is in line with the current situation, I don't think Archdruid Malfurion would agree with your approach." The silver-haired man at the head was none other than Jared Shadowsong, who had a brief exchange with Ethan when he first arrived here. At this moment, he shook his head with a wry smile and said, "Indeed, considering the safety of Whisperwind Priest, the Archdruid's concern is completely understandable. But I hope he can look at the entire battle situation and focus on the overall picture." He paused, and as he spoke, Jared stretched out his hand and tapped the location of Zin Ashari on the map on the table, looking deeply in that direction. Although we, with the help of demigods, took advantage of the demon's unstable foothold to advance the battle line to the outskirts of Zin Ashari, it is difficult to go further. He continued, "In the battles in recent days, the Burning Legion has begun to gradually adapt to the impact of demigods. The strong men of the Burning Legion, such as Manaroth, Magtheridon, and Khazrogal, have appeared on the front line one after another, and their power is heart-stopping. If we are a little careless and go deep into the enemy's position, even demigods will be at risk of falling." Having said this, Jared rubbed his brows tiredly, with a hint of helplessness in his voice. "In addition, we need more allies. Not just demigod allies, but also the support of the mortal army. Our current military strength can only barely maintain a balance with the Burning Legion, and we are unable to launch further attacks to close the portal of the Well of Eternity. In the process, the Burning Legion is continuously sending more demons to Azeroth. If we don't get support from new forces, sooner or later we will be overwhelmed by the endless reinforcements of the Burning Legion." Ethan heard Jared's words and couldn't help but nod in agreement. Indeed, this new commander was completely different from the previous noble generals. He did not have the arrogant attitude of treating the war that would determine the fate of Azeroth as a mere civil war among the Night Elves. Instead, he sincerely considered the future of Azeroth as a whole. Ethan also realized something more critical. Archimonde the Defiler, the strongest combat force of the vanguard of the Burning Legion, had not yet appeared on the battlefield. This seemed to mean that Archimonde believed the current situation was still under his control and that there was no need for him to take action personally. This was undoubtedly a disturbing signal, but it also reminded Ethan and his companions that they must work harder to turn the tide of the war. At this moment, Ethan's eyes fell on a night elf with a bare upper body. He recognized the man from his appearance, Fandral Staghelm, the second in command of the Druid sect and Malfurion's most valued apprentice. Fandral seemed deeply troubled. He scratched his head irritably, making his already unmanaged long grass-green hair even messier. "Tsk, this is really troublesome," Fandral muttered. "We have mobilized all the allies we can muster. The demigods brought their respective families from Mount Hyjal, as well as chimeras, dryads, and elf dragons. When natural allies join in, Mr. Ethan also found Tauren and Furbolgs, but where are we going to find more reinforcements?" That. Ethan heard this and suddenly raised his hand to interrupt everyone's debate. He looked around until all eyes were on him, then continued, "Can I make a suggestion?" Everyone was stunned for a moment and seemed to notice that Ethan had arrived in the tent. They all turned around with expressions of surprise and anticipation on their faces. Before that, they had been so immersed in the heated discussion that they had completely ignored everything around them. Chapter 704. Pandaria. Seeing Kai Wen, everyone in the room looked surprised. The resistance army was in a state of high anxiety, feeling helpless and cornered. At this critical moment, Ethan Kwaya's arrival undoubtedly brought new possibilities. They stood up one after another and bowed slightly to Ethan to show their respect. Ethan accepted their homage without hesitation, as he felt he deserved it. Jared spoke on behalf of everyone. "Of course, Mr. Kwai. No one is more qualified to give opinions on this than you. In fact, my idea was inspired by your previous strategy of uniting various races. My sister also said that you are very talented in strategy and overall perspective. We invited you here to gain some inspiration from your wisdom. Please speak freely, even if it is just a small possibility." Ethan was a little surprised by Jared's words. He glanced at Maiev, who was standing next to him, and noticed that the leader of the battle priests remained calm and composed. Ethan couldn't help but think to himself, "Does Maiev think so highly of me? I can't tell at all." Fandral walked over with a warm smile and light steps. Every step he took seemed so calm, as if each one was in harmony with nature. He approached Ethan and performed a unique druidic etiquette deeply, showing his respect and recognition of Ethan's strength. "I have long heard that a unique druid brother has appeared in the resistance camp." Fandral's voice was gentle and magnetic. "Mr. Ethan Kwai, you succeeded without any teacher in understanding the power of a druid. This talent and hard work are truly admirable." He paused for a moment, then introduced himself. "I am Fandral Staghelm, a disciple of Archdruid Malfurion. It is a blessing to meet you today. On behalf of the Archdruid, I would like to express my sincere greetings and best regards." Speaking of this, Fandral grabbed his messy long green hair with some embarrassment and showed a simple smile. "Originally, the Archdruid planned to come to see you in person, but Miss Taran showed up. Due to some circumstances, he had to stay with her temporarily. You know, he has a lot to say to you about the way of druidry and the mysteries of nature." Fandral's eyes became a little strange as he spoke. He couldn't help but look at Ethan a few more times and muttered to himself. This was the first time he had seen his mentor love and hate someone so much. He had heard the rumors about Ethan and Tarand. It was also the first time he discovered that besides his mentor's brother, there was someone who dared to challenge the Archdruid. And this person was obviously more of a threat than the Archdruid's younger brother. However, Fandral also clearly realized that Ethan was not an ordinary person. Judging from his strength, he was undoubtedly on the same level as the Archdruid. As a disciple, it was not easy for him to get involved in his mentor's emotional entanglements. Ethan already knew in his heart that the attitude of these indigenous druids towards him might be complicated. Of course, he didn't take this to heart, and his expression remained calm and composed. From the day he decided to pry a corner, he had already anticipated the possible situations he would face. In fact, if he had not done this, he could have received greater preferential treatment in Malfurion's druid order by virtue of his status as a druid. But compared to the huge rewards that might be obtained if the corner was successfully exploited, this loss was worth it in his opinion. Fandral Staghelm was a smart man, and he could naturally see Ethan's attitude. After the simple greetings, he did not continue to delve into the topic, but took 2 steps back knowingly and gave up his position. Ethan solemnly glanced at everyone present. Everyone, our idea of asking for help seems to have fallen into a misunderstanding. Ethan's voice was low and powerful. The first thing you think. The potential of the surrounding tribes is still untapped. However, we must face the harsh reality. Looking at the 4 territories of the Dark Knight Empire, it is difficult for us to garner more support. He walked to the map, pointed at various areas, and began to speak. This war has been ongoing for a long time, and those interested in joining the resistance have already made their positions clear. The Tauren, wild boars, bear monsters, dryads, and mountain giants have become our steadfast allies. However, the few remaining tribes are constrained by various insurmountable external factors, making it difficult for them to support us at their own risk in the short term. So, Ethan stretched out his right index finger, his gaze becoming more profound. We need to change our thinking, broaden our horizons, and look further afield. Only in this way can we find other races that can send reinforcements and inject new energy into our cause. Ask for help from outsiders? As soon as he finished speaking, a white-faced, beardless male night elf next to the conference table frowned. The gorgeous armor he wore shone coldly under the light, revealing his status as an upper elf. "Mr. Ethan, your idea is very bold, but I must pour cold water on it," the upper elf said with a hint of hesitation and worry in his tone. Due to the relatively tough foreign policy of the Night Elves during the heyday of the Empire, our relationship with other races is not harmonious. Under such circumstances, it may be difficult to obtain support from foreigners. Seeing the surprise and confusion in Ethan's eyes, Jared smiled and introduced him. "Mr. Ethan, this is Otho Blackforest, the leader of the magic swordsmen of Black Crow Castle. He is a leader with great strategic vision and an important participant in our meeting." Upon hearing this, Ethan immediately nodded to Jared in thanks and turned his attention to Otho. He looked up and down at the leader of the demonic swordsmen, secretly admiring the other's majesty and magnanimity. "Mr. Otho, I think you may have misunderstood my intention," Ethan explained patiently with a faint smile. "You seem to think that I am considering asking the trolls for help?" Otho raised his eyebrows slightly, a look of surprise flashing across his face. "Isn't it? After all, most of the races around the Dark Knight Empire are deeply involved in the vortex of war. Among the remaining races, those with the ability and willingness to aid us seem to be the trolls. As we all know, before the rise of the Night Elves, they were the overlords of this world." "Of course not," Ethan shook his head slightly, a confident and calm smile on his face. "Mr. Otho, your analysis is certainly reasonable, but I have not forgotten an important factor, the historical entanglement between trolls and Night Elves. They harbor a deep hatred for us, and more than anyone else, hope that the Burning Legion will completely destroy us. Expecting them to stand up and help us at this critical moment is wishful thinking." Having said this, Ethan paused, his eyes flashing with excitement. "The reinforcements I am talking about do not come from trolls, but from the Pandaren far away in Pandaria. They are a people with a long history and a powerful civilization. Apart from the Dark Knight Empire and the Troll Kingdom, they are one of the only 3 civilizations in Kalimdor capable of establishing an empire. They have a unique culture and strength, and are exactly the powerful allies we need right now. Unlike 10,000 years later, the ancient continent of Kalimdor today is still a vast and complete territory. Among them, the mysterious land of Pandaria lies quietly outside the southern territory of the Dark Knight Empire. The Dark Knight Empire is closely adjacent to the holy mountain of Zuldazar, where the Zandalari trolls have lived for generations. These 2 ancient fortresses seem to jointly guard this ancient continent. The territory of the Dark Knight Empire is truly breathtaking. From east to west, it spans almost half of the ancient Kalimdor continent, and its vastness is unimaginable. Even in the extremely cold north, they were not deterred by the cold and built the solid city of Shandara as a barrier against foreign enemies. However, what is strange is that a large area of territory to the south of the Dark Knight Empire is not included in its possession. This is not due to a lack of strength, but because of ancient history. Under the rule of Queen Ashara, the Dark Knight Empire launched an unprecedented war with the Troll Empire, which once ruled the entire continent. That war was like a dark storm, engulfing the entire continent of Kalimdor. In the end, the Night Elves, who wielded powerful arcane magic, won the war with their wisdom and courage. Despite her strength, Queen Ashara did not kill all the defeated trolls. She dismissed the civilization level of the Troll Empire, believing that these primitive beings could not pose a threat to the Dark Knight Empire, which boasted a brilliant civilization. Just as humans on Blue Star evolved from apes, the Night Elves actually evolved from trolls. Therefore, in the eyes of Night Elves, trolls are almost equivalent to the primitive humans and Australopithecus in the eyes of modern humans. Ashara disdained the civilization level of the Troll Empire and believed that these creatures, which she saw as primitive monkeys, could not threaten the Dark Knight Empire. Thus, she chose forgiveness and allowed the trolls to survive outside the southern territory of the Dark Knight Empire. Zandalar is the heart of troll civilization. It was once a city-state full of glory and pride. However, under Ashara's iron heel, their dignity was ruthlessly trampled upon. Although anger surged in the trolls' blood and their dissatisfaction with Ashara made their eyes blaze with fury, the cruelty of reality was like an insurmountable mountain, weighing heavily on their hearts. At the critical moment of life and death, the Zandalari trolls had no choice but to lower their proud heads and sue Queen Ashara for peace, with a tragic gesture of shattering their teeth and swallowing their blood. Queen Ashara looked down at these once arrogant trolls with disdain. In her eyes, they were nothing more than a group of ridiculous clowns. So she agreed to their request, but the conditions were harsh. The trolls must continue to live in the holy mountain of Zandalar, and this holy mountain was just a small piece of heaven she allowed them. Chapter 705, Past Events in Kalimdor. Following Queen Ashara's order, Gurdak, Zulfarak, Zul'Gurub, and the mountain of Zandalari became the last territories of the trolls. In the eyes of the elves, this was a great kindness they had extended to the trolls. However, from the trolls' perspective, the total area of these territories was less than one-third of what they had been at their peak. How humiliating and sad this was. Due to the obstruction of the Zandalar Holy Mountain, Queen Ashara did not continue to explore Peri in the south. Perhaps, in her opinion, nothing in this world could threaten her existence. However, just as she was summoning demons and trampling on life wantonly, the Pandaren sent a special envoy to warn her. Unfortunately, the extremely confident Queen Ashara did not take the Pandaren's kind reminder to heart. She continued on her path of self-destruction, as if the whole world was under her control. Pandaren, Empire? Jared's voice was filled with incredulous surprise. The combination of these words set off a storm in his mind. Not every civilization can build an empire, and the establishment of an empire is not easy. It requires not only prosperity and strength, but also a highly developed civilization and wisdom. Even the powerful Tauren only exist in the form of tribes and have never crossed the threshold of empire. The former Troll Empire is now gradually losing its former glory in the torrent of history and is slipping towards the form of a tribe. The hallmark of an empire is a highly developed civilization and excellent wisdom. Civilization and wisdom require sufficient time and a population base to accumulate. A huge population requires vast and fertile land to support it. Therefore, Ethan's words meant that the Pandaren of Pandaria had established a civilization of the same level as the Dark Knight Empire. That's why they were surprised. In fact, the Night Elves were not ignorant of the Pandaren, but they had always thought that the Pandaren were a tribal civilization similar to the Tauren. Now, Ethan's words had broken this inherent concept and revealed a shocking fact. Pandaria's level of civilization was comparable to that of the Night Elves. This news was like a bombshell, exploding in the hearts of everyone present. However, no one disputed Ethan's words. His achievements, strength, and the support of Tyrande, Maiev, and others had already won him the trust and respect of everyone. Everyone believed in his character. He was a self-taught druid, a traveler who had journeyed across the land and was knowledgeable. Even the Tauren chief Huan Highmountain treated him with great courtesy and regarded him as a guest. Therefore, even though Ethan's words really subverted all their beliefs, they all chose to believe him. "Mr. Ethan, your words are truly inspiring," Jared sighed. "If we can gain the approval of the Pandaren, then we will welcome reinforcements from Pandaria." "Indeed," Ethan nodded with a smile and continued. "In fact, being recognized by the Pandaren not only means that we will receive support from the powerful race of Pandaria, but also represents the other races in Pandaria, such as Hosens, Jinyu, Buffalo People, etc. They will all lend a helping hand to us. Among the races in Pandaria, the Jinyu and Hosen are undoubtedly the most solid backing of the Pandaren. Their alliance is unbreakable, and they jointly protect this land. However, the relationship between the Yongal and the Pandaren appears to be quite subtle, far less intimate than the former two. The history of the Buffalo People can be traced back thousands of years. They were the masters of the central wilderness, occupying a place in the glorious era when the Thunder God ruled the Mogu Empire. The forest demigod Cenarius discovered this new race in an accidental encounter. He was deeply attracted by the tenacity and bravery of the Buffalo People and decided to stay in their camp, teaching them his natural ways bit by bit. Under the guidance of Cenarius, the Buffalo People began to learn to coexist with nature. Harmoniously living with nature, the Buffalo People absorbed the wisdom and power of the forest. However, their peaceful times did not last long. As the threat of trolls approached, the battle for living space between the Buffalo People and the trolls became increasingly fierce. Tired of the endless fighting and bloodshed, the Buffalo People made a difficult decision to leave the central wilderness and migrate south to Pandaria. They hoped to find a new home and peace in this new land. But fate seemed not to favor this poor ethnic group. As soon as they escaped the shadow of the trolls, they encountered the cruel enslavement of the Mogu tribe. Under the repressive rule of the Mogu, the Buffalo People lost their freedom and dignity, forced to work for their slave masters. Those dark days became an eternal pain and shame in their hearts. It was not until the Pandaren joined other races to overthrow the tyranny of the Mogu that the Buffalo People regained their freedom. However, long-term slavery had caused them to lose much of their culture and history. Serious differences of opinion arose among the tribes of the freed Buffalo People, and they urgently needed to find new directions and goals to reunite the strength of the tribe. The Buffalo People group divided due to these differences and evolved into three distinct tribes. One tribe deeply loved peace and nature. With the dream of finding their lost glory and tradition, they resolutely left Pandaria and embarked on a journey north to find their roots. During their long exploration, they unexpectedly met the ancient forest demigod Cenarius again. The joy and kindness of this reunion allowed them to re-establish a deep connection with Cenarius, and they settled in High Mountain, becoming the Tauren of High Mountain. Another tribe of Buffalo People, weary of worldly disputes and battles, chose to head to the extremely cold storm cliffs in the north to find a peaceful home. There, they lived a simple and peaceful life in the company of wind and snow, gradually changing their name to the Yak People. However, a third tribe adhered to the ancient fighting traditions. They inherited the ancient name and fighting spirit of the Buffalo People and chose to continue living in the hot land of Pandaria. Due to their ideological differences with peace-loving groups like the Pandaren and Jinyu, disputes and conflicts continued. Finally, they decided to leave the Vale of Eternal Blossoms in the core of Pandaria and move west to the Mantis Plateau outside Panlong. On this vast plateau, whenever the Mantid invaded the Dragon Spine Wall, the Yongal were always the first to engage in fierce battles with them. Although the battles were fierce and frequent, this was consistent with their warlike nature. Ethan was certain that even if they had differences of opinion with the Pandaren, when they heard they could fight for Azeroth, the Yongal would not hesitate to answer the call. Sure enough, I knew that Mr. Gwyn's plans were always very effective. Upon hearing Jared's response, Ethan's heart tightened slightly, but his face remained calm. He noticed a hidden depth behind the kind and friendly smile on Jared's face, which made him feel uneasy. Jared's next words confirmed Ethan's hunch. In a seemingly relaxed but serious tone, Jared said, "Mr. Ethan, since this proposal was made by you, I think it would be most appropriate for you to go to Pandaria in person and request the Pandaren to send reinforcements." Jared's words made Ethan feel helpless. He knew that the former guard captain had indeed become much more assertive after becoming the commander-in-chief of the coalition forces. In the past, Jared would not have made such a request so directly. "I knew." Ethan scratched his head gently, showing a tangled expression. "Commander." "Ethan, I can go to Pandaria to request reinforcements, but before setting off, I must complete another important task," Jared said. "Oh? Another job?" Jared raised his eyebrows slightly, a curious look on his face. What could be more important than asking for help? If it's convenient, can you reveal the specifics? Although the current situation is still considered stable, we all know that this is only temporary. We need to obtain support from new forces as soon as possible to enhance our strength. Ethan turned his head slightly and glanced at Maev's face, hesitating. He knew that once Elun's instructions were made public, his identity as a member of the Moon Goddess would no longer be concealed and would become a well-known secret among the top brass of the Resistance. Maiev noticed Ethan's hesitation. She closed her eyes gently, seeming to weigh the pros and cons deep in her heart. After a moment, she opened her eyes and spoke for Ethan in public. "Ethan is right. He must complete Elun's oracle first. We can only put the diplomatic work of visiting Pandaria on hold for the time being." She raised her head and cast soft eyes on her brother, Jared. Watching him grow from an immature boy to the current commander of the Resistance Army, Maev's heart was filled with pride and joy. However, considering the matter at this critical moment, she must firmly support Ethan's decision. If the situation really reaches the point where there is no need to delay, I suggest that we consider sending another person to visit Pandaria, Maiev added. Jared was stunned. He knew his sister's temper. She was not a person who liked to joke. He and the high-ranking rebels in the tent all turned their attention to Ethan, with surprise and curiosity written on their faces. "Oracle? Do you mean Elun's oracle?" Jarod asked. "Otherwise?" Ethan shrugged slightly, showing a helpless smile. "Isn't there only one true god that the Night Elves believe in, Elun?" Hearing Ethan's answer, a look of realization flashed in Jared's eyes. He glanced at Maiev secretly and seemed to understand something. He thought to himself, "So that's the case. No wonder Maiev is uncharacteristically thinking so highly of a member of the opposite sex." Chapter 7-6, Goddess Elun's Favorite. With Elun's oracle as an endorsement, the Resistance's top brass placed more emphasis on Ethan. Jared frowned slightly, his heart filled with curiosity and awe of the unknown. He knew the importance of the oracle and understood Ethan's hesitation at this time. However, he still tentatively asked, "Ethan, can I ask about the specific content of the oracle? Of course, if it is not convenient to disclose it, then forget it." Ethan nodded lightly. "Actually, there is nothing in the oracle that cannot be revealed. Elun hopes that I can help rescue Queen Tyrande Whisperwind, who is in trouble." Speaking of this, Ethan's expression became a little complicated, and he couldn't help but glance at Maiev. He knew that this information might not be easy for Maiev to accept. Ethan took a deep breath and finally decided to make this secret public. He believed that only in this way could everyone better understand the purpose and importance of his mission. "Perhaps High Priest Dejana mentioned it before she passed out," Ethan continued. "The High Priest of Whisperwind is the successor personally chosen by the Moon Goddess Elun. Her safety is not only related to our Night Elves' faith, but also to the peace and stability of the entire continent of Azeroth." Maev's face tightened. High Priest Dejana has always enjoyed high prestige in the Sisterhood of Elun. She is known for her gentleness and love, and she cares for everyone almost equally. This selfless dedication has won her the respect and love of many sisters. However, just as there are shadows under the moonlight, Dejana also has her shortcomings. She is too indecisive, which leads to her often lacking the necessary decisiveness in governance. Although Maiev had already heard about the reputation of Tyrande, a rapidly rising star, she had never associated this newly promoted priest with the position of future high priest until Dejana revealed the truth herself. In her mind, the members of the Sisterhood of Elune, including herself, all agreed that she would be Dejana's successor and shoulder the important task of leading the Sisterhood into the future. However, Ethan's sudden revelation was like a bomb, setting off a storm in Maiev's mind. For a moment, her thinking seemed to have come to a standstill, and her brain went blank. She couldn't believe that her years of hard work and dedication had become meaningless at this moment. After the initial shock and confusion, a strong feeling of dissatisfaction and resistance surged deep in Maiev's heart. She was unwilling to accept this cruel reality, let alone admit that her skills were inferior to others. But at the same time, she also clearly felt the powerlessness from her heart. Over the years, High Priest Dejana has been carefully cultivating all aspects of Maiev's qualities. Except for her personality, which cannot be easily changed, she already has all the qualifications to succeed the High Priest. However, if everything Ethan says is true, then all her efforts and dedication will be in vain. This huge psychological gap made Maiev feel unbearable pain and frustration. Is it appointed by Elune? Ha-ha! Maiev whispered this sentence softly, with a hint of indescribable complex emotions in her voice. At this time, she was not the paranoid person who would be swallowed up by hatred 10,000 years later. At this time, she managed her emotions quite well, and during the time when she and Tyrande were traveling together, their relationship was quite harmonious. Although her mood was very complicated at this time, after taking a few deep breaths to adjust, she quickly recovered from the previous shock. Smiling to herself, Maiev shook her head gently to get rid of those messy thoughts. She motioned for Ethan to continue. Let's talk about this topic in private. It's better to get down to business now. Ethan looked at Maiev and sighed deeply. He knew that Maiev must be in a bad mood at this time. After all, the news was too sudden and unexpected for her. He followed Maiev's words and to change the subject again. Okay, let's proceed. Maiev, let's get back to the subject. I can't go against the oracle issued by the moon goddess. If I have to go to Pandaria as an envoy, then before I set off, I must first find a way to rescue Miss Tyrande. Jarod, Fandral, and other high-ranking resistance officials nodded in agreement. Their faces showed a mix of helplessness and respect for the oracle, as well as trust in Ethan. Since it was the moon goddess Elune who personally asked me to do this, I have no choice. Jarod sighed, his furrowed brows hiding countless worries. He raised his hand and gently rubbed his forehead. It's just that, with the Burning Legion receiving constant reinforcements, the resistance is in an increasingly difficult situation and urgently needs foreign aid. Fandral echoed, yes, the Pandaren in Pandaria have very little communication with us. Their culture, customs, and even language are quite different from ours. Ethan, you have had contact with them and have the deepest understanding. You are undoubtedly the most suitable person for this mission. His tone was full of worry. If it were anyone else, I'm afraid it would be difficult to achieve our goals. Ethan rested his chin on his hand, lost in thought. After a moment, he raised his head and said, in fact, I am not required to serve as an envoy to the Pandaren. The Pandaren are a peace-loving race who respect nature and life. I believe that in the face of such a serious crisis, they will definitely be willing to lend a helping hand. But, he paused, considering his words carefully. To ensure nothing goes wrong, we need to formulate a careful plan and prepare a gesture that can impress them with our sincerity. The only problem was that Ethan wasn't sure about the current state of Pandaria. If his memory was correct, Pandaria at this point in time should be under the rule of Xiaohao, the last emperor of the Pandaren. The legendary emperor, with his great achievements, turned himself into an endless mist covering the entire Pandaria. This fog acted like a mysterious veil, isolating the mainland from the outside world and guarding the land. When the catastrophic cataclysm struck, the ancient continent of Kalimdor was torn apart and transformed into the future layout of the 4 continents, the Eastern Kingdoms, Pandaria, Kalimdor, and Northrend. It was the protection of this mist that allowed Pandaria to survive and maintain its intact form. However, because of the fog, Pandaria had since cut off all contact with the outside world and became an isolated existence. Ethan tried hard to recall the details about Xiaohao's transformation into the mist. He vaguely remembered that this event occurred before the division of ancient Kalimdor, but he did not know the exact timeline. It was impossible for Warcraft history to record all the details. Although the wheel of history would always move forward according to the established trajectory, every choice and effort could bring subtle changes to this trajectory. Although according to the original historical development, we can also overcome the difficulties, Ethan thought to himself, but if there is a chance, I still want to take a gamble and try to cause more damage to the Burning Legion. Although the demons of the Burning Legion could be resurrected in the twisting nether after death, according to the law of conservation of energy, Ethan knew that every resurrection came at a cost. The simplest problem was time. This resource, which could not be ignored, would become their biggest enemy. If they could deal a more painful blow to the Burning Legion in the War of the Ancients, then their resurrection time would be greatly extended. This would win precious respite for the creatures on Azeroth, giving them the opportunity to recuperate and rebuild their homes. And more importantly, this might also curb the scale of the Satyr rebellion that would inevitably occur to some extent, because this land would bring more lasting peace. Peace and tranquility reigned in Pandaria, a land where Pandaren, creatures that appear cute and harmless, actually possess incredible combat prowess. In the unique climate of Pandaria, the profession of warrior monk was born. These warrior monks not only helped the Pandaren alliance break free from the cruel enslavement of the Mogu tribe, but also stood their ground when the Zandalari trolls invaded. During a critical moment when the Pandaren faced life and death, they unexpectedly found a new ally, the Cloud Serpents, who had been friends with the Pandaren for generations. These highly intelligent creatures joined the battle like radiant soldiers, turning the tide in favor of the Pandaren. Moreover, Pandaria harbors an even greater power. The 4 wilderness demigods, known as the 4 gods, are the guardians of this land. They possess unparalleled strength. Ethan knew very well that if these 4 demigods could be persuaded to join the fight against the Burning Legion, the balance of victory might tilt in their favor. With many demigods joining forces to launch an attack, even the commander-in-chief of the Burning Legion's vanguard, as powerful as Archimonde, would find no escape under their encirclement. Chapter 707, Potential is Potential, Now is Now, Pandaria. The leader of the magic swordsmen, Oso Black Forest, was lost in thought. He nodded slightly, as if recalling the distant past. When you mentioned it, I did remember. In the past, there were Pandaren from Pandaria who once set foot on the land of the Dark Knight Empire. Did they come to wander? At least that's what they said. His nostalgia for that past event was evident in his tone. Those Pandaren who called themselves lore walkers left a deep impression on the people of Suramar with their impressive fighting prowess and humble attitude. However, they did not stay long in Suramar, but continued on their wandering journey, exploring the unknown world. Ethan took the opportunity to add, nodding affirmatively, yes, those Pandaren monks are the most mainstream combatants in Pandaria. Their profession was founded by a stunningly talented Pandaren, and they have received many awards from all over the world. The inspiration of the gods, that is, the guidance of the 4 demigods. If we can ask the 4 demigods of Pandaria to assist us, our chances of defeating the Burning Legion will be much higher. Jared's eyes widened in surprise. Although he was a civilian officer who had risen to the top through his innate military talent, his knowledge was not as extensive as that of the Qin clan, who had received elite education since childhood. He asked in disbelief, 4 demigods? Ethan, are you sure? Without a doubt, Ethan replied, turning to look at Fandral Staghelm. Fandral, you must have heard Cenarius mention this before, right? Yes, Fandral nodded slightly, his rough hands caressing his hairy chin as he fell into thought. Indeed, I have some impressions. He added, those demigods are called the 4 heavenly gods, and they are named White Tiger Xuenu, Qinglong Yulong, Zhuhe Qijing, and Xuan Shengzhao. Each of them possesses awe-inspiring power. He paused, frowning slightly as he recalled more detailed information. However, Cenarius once mentioned that these 4 gods were severely injured while fighting a powerful Mogu emperor named Thunder God. I'm not sure if they've regained their former strength after all these years. Upon hearing this, Gerard suddenly stood up from his seat and said decisively, "No matter what, we must try our best. I will immediately send a special envoy to Pandaria to seek support from the 4 gods and Pandaren. This is the key to defeating the Burning Legion." After deciding to seek help from the mysterious Pandaria, the atmosphere in the conference room became solemn again. The remaining key question was who should be sent on this important mission. As a master who had recently joined the Resistance, Ethan did not know much about the current composition of the top management. He sat quietly aside, watching the frowns and serious expressions of Jared and others without interrupting their discussion rashly. At this moment, the eyes of Gerard and others turned to him invariably. "Ethan, you know Pandaria best. Who do you think we should send?" Gerard asked. Everyone else also looked at him expectantly. Ethan was taken aback for a moment, then shook his head humbly. "Although I have had some contact with the Panda people, I think the selection of the special envoy should be decided by everyone together." Despite this, Gerard and the others insisted on Ethan recommending several members. In their view, in terms of qualifications, Ethan was just a newcomer to the Resistance, but in terms of strength and merit, he was fully capable of supporting a mountaintop in the Resistance. Not to mention, the entire framework of the plan was completed by Ethan. He knew the framework of the entire plan very well, and his recommendations were undoubtedly of high reference value. In short, regardless of whether Ethan meant it that way or not, his opinion had to be respected. After 2 days of intense discussions, the main members of the special mission sent to Pandaria were finally decided. After 2 days of intense discussions and careful deliberation, the list of members for the special mission to Pandaria was finally determined. Otho Blackforest, the leader of the magic swordsmen who had previously had brief contact with the Pandaren, was unanimously elected as the leader of the envoy. The Sisters of Elune and the Druids each sent 1 representative to accompany him. To ensure safety, the 3 parties also arranged for a small number of their most elite members to escort the mission. It is worth mentioning that Shandis Yue, recommended by Ethan, was also successfully selected as the deputy envoy of the mission, becoming the second in command. Me, Shandis Feathermoon pointed to her nose in shock when she heard Maiev read her name. "I actually want to join the mission?" After hearing the list given by Maiev, Shandis interrupted her impatiently. "Please wait, why me?" Shandis's face was full of doubts and uneasiness. "I'm just a trainee priest of the Sisterhood, far from an elite. How could I be qualified for such an important task?" Moreover, even within the Sisterhood, she was trained to be a combat priest. For a moment, Shandris even wondered if Maiev was seeking revenge. After all, her mentor Tyrande was now captured. Maiev, as the temporary leader of the Sisterhood, might see this as an opportunity to sideline her. But Maiev didn't care about Shandris's rudeness. She understood the young girl's inner anxieties and struggles. When communicating with Tyrande in the Sky Seat, she had learned about Shandris from her. To Maiev, Shandis was not just her friend's disciple, but more like her own child. Even if this friend had replaced her as high priest, she could not harbor any ill will towards Shandis. "This is Ethan's request," Maiev said calmly, handing a letter of recommendation to Shandris. Shandis took the letter with confusion and saw her name clearly written in the recommendation column above, with Ethan's signature at the bottom. This... Shandis still felt a little unbelievable. Her eyes lingered on the recommendation letter for a long time before she slowly raised her head and looked at Maiev. "Do I really have to go?" Shandris still felt a little incredulous. Her mentor Tyrande was still imprisoned in the palace. Logically speaking, it was impossible for her to leave Zin Azalin at this juncture. "Of course," Maiev smiled and nodded, seemingly unaware of the reluctance in Shandris's words. "Mr. Ethan speaks highly of you. He thinks you have the potential to become an excellent messenger. Moreover, this is also a good opportunity to train and improve yourself. I believe you will be able to handle this task." After hastily bidding farewell to Maiev, who had come to deliver the news, Chandris hurriedly left the tent where she lived with other members of the sisterhood, full of doubts and uneasiness. After a while, she arrived at a slightly luxurious single-person magic tent. This tent was completely different from ordinary military tents. It exuded a faint magical light, indicating its extraordinary nature. The tent was exquisite and gorgeous on the outside, and even more unique on the inside. It turned out that an advanced magic similar to the space expansion spell had been cast inside, making the internal space far larger than the exterior suggested. Such a space was enough to meet a person's various living needs, a rare luxury in the military, where logistics were difficult. In the army, those who could enjoy such treatment were all high-level generals with distinguished status. However, the tent in front of Shandis at this time belonged to Ethan. She hesitated for a moment, then mustered up the courage to go in. The light inside the tent was soft, and the layout was simple yet elegant. Ethan was packing his luggage. When Ethan heard Shandis's voice, he stopped what he was doing and turned around. "Master Ethan." Shandis bowed slightly, but Ethan could hear the anxiety and confusion in her voice. He looked at her and sighed softly. "You are finally here, Shandis," Ethan said. Shandis was about to ask something, but Defying spoke first. "I know you have doubts, but it is indeed my decision to recommend you to go to Pandaria." Upon hearing this, Shandis frowned slightly, her eyes full of confusion. She stared at Ethan, hoping to find a hint of jest in his eyes, but his gaze was deep and firm. It was clearly not a joke. "Didn't we agree before that I would personally rescue the mentor?" Shandis pursed her lips, her voice tinged with grievance. "Why would you choose to send me to Pandaria at this time? Don't you believe in my strength? Haven't you always praised me and said that I have the potential to become a Sentinel General?" Ethan looked at Shandis and sighed helplessly. "If I said I don't believe in your strength, it would obviously be a lie." He paused and continued. "Your talent and potential are the best I have ever seen among the Night Elves. I believe that, given time, you will become a great Sentinel General." Shandis did become the Sentinel General in the original story, and she could be called the military leader of the Night Elves. "But potential is potential, and now is now," Ethan explained. "If you regard potential as the present, then why don't the Dragon Legion let the young dragons go on the battlefield? Your future is undoubtedly bright. With 10 or 20 years of hard work and training, you will definitely become the best among our combat forces. However, you have not yet been able to fully unleash that potential." He paused and then persuaded. "The task of rescuing Tyrande is extremely difficult and full of dangers. If I recruit you into the assault team due to a moment of weakness, then in this crucial covert operation, even a slight mistake could cause us irreparable losses. By then, not only would we fail to rescue Tyrande, but we might also alert the enemy, making the Burning Legion and the Highborn more vigilant. Such a consequence is something I cannot accept at any cost." Ethan's tone gradually became more serious, and he shook his head. "In that case, I can guarantee that I can escape at any time. But what about you? What about Tyrande? What should I do then?" Chapter 708, Druid Spell Exchange Between Two Worlds. Shandis listened and realized her willfulness. She opened her mouth, wanting to say something, but seeing Ethan's serious face, she finally chose to remain silent. "I can't guarantee that Miss Tyrande can be rescued 100% of the time, but I will definitely do my best," Ethan assured her. He then began to worry about Shandris again. Additionally, the journey to Pandaria is full of unknowns and dangers. This journey is destined to be anything but uneventful. It was not difficult to bypass the demon-infested Zin Ashari. The high elf mages in the Resistance were proficient in space magic and could teleport directly to the southern border fortress of the Dark Knight Empire, avoiding those troublesome demons. However, the journey to Pandaria was not all smooth sailing. The only way the special envoy must pass is through the Holy Land in the hearts of the Zandalari Trolls, the Zandalari Holy Mountain. In the past, the Night Elves, under the iron-fisted rule of Ashara, were forced to sign a humiliating treaty with the Zandalari Trolls, which also aroused the Zandalari Trolls' deep hatred for the Night Elves. Nowadays, once a Night Elf dares to leave their own territory and enter the control area of the Zandalari, it is certain that those who call themselves troll-wise men will take notice and attack the special envoy to vent their long-suppressed anger. Humph! Shandis gently wiped the long hair hanging on her shoulders and raised a confident arc at the corner of her mouth. With Lord Oso Blackforest personally leading the team, how can our whereabouts be discovered so easily? Unless the Zandalari trolls are out in force, it would be impossible for them to capture our advance. When Ethan heard this, he couldn't help but shake his head and laugh. He reached out his hand and patted Shandis on the head lovingly. You girl, you are still too young. Although arcane magic is powerful, the voodoo magic of the demons also has its own uniqueness. We must not underestimate it, or we might find ourselves in trouble. Okay, I know. Chandris knocked off Ethan's hand impatiently, with a slightly raised corner of her mouth, showing a hint of stubbornness and annoyance. You haven't become Miss Tehran's husband yet. Are you just starting to act like an elder in front of me? She playfully stretched out her little fist and tapped Ethan on the chest. Then, she raised her neck proudly and hummed softly. You'd better stop worrying about me now and concentrate on completing the important tasks assigned to you by the goddess. Shandis patted her young but already swollen breasts with a confident smile on her face. Don't underestimate me. I will definitely impress you next time you come back. Just wait for me. Besides, a trace of unwillingness and worry flashed in Shandis's eyes. Miss Tehran is begging you. Please rescue her. Due to time constraints, the members of the special mission issued strict orders. They only had 3 days to rest and recuperate. 3 days later, in the evening, this time period is equivalent to human mourning for the night elves. The high elf mages gathered together. Their hands gently waved and began to cast spells together. Soon, the air was filled with blue-purple arcane aura. Under the radiance of this magic, nearly 100 members of the special envoy were drawn by the power of magic and disappeared into the shimmering teleportation array one after another. Ethan stood in the crowd of farewells, watching every figure disappearing in the light. When Chandris looked at him for the last time, those deep eyes seemed to contain 1,000 words. Ethan felt this heavy expectation. Next, Ethan did not go to the front immediately. It's not that he isn't anxious to save Tyrande. In this regard, he still trusts Elune. Before he arrives, the goddess will protect her chosen one. During the days he stayed in the camp, Ethan and Fandral were inseparable. They discussed druidic magic together and exchanged their insights on nature. Relying on his extraordinary talent, Ethan quickly mastered the unique druid spells of Azeroth. His progress was so rapid that even Fandral was amazed. Ability Mastery. You have mastered Starlight Expertise Red. Wrath of Starlight. The effect of your star and moon spells is enhanced. Ability Mastery. You have mastered the Gathering Starlight Expertise. Gathering Starlight. Your star and moon spells are released faster and can be cast without materials. Ability Mastery. You have mastered the Natural Transformation Expertise. Natural Transformation. With the blessing of the Wilderness Demigod, you can transform into a variety of creatures. Ability Mastery. You have mastered Wild Instinct, Wild Charge, and Wild Heart specialty skills. Ability Mastery. You have mastered the Survival of the Fittest expertise. Survival of the Fittest. You can enhance your combat effectiveness and recovery capabilities by transforming into a wilderness form suitable for the environment. Ability Mastery. You have mastered the Soul of Quillity and Soul of Life specialties. Soul of Tranquility. The effect of your druid healing spells is enhanced. Soul of Life. Your perception attribute gains a bonus. Ability Mastery. The Naturalism specialty work. Naturalism. You can perform wild transformation in the plant field. During this short break, Ethan achieved remarkable results, and the harvest was staggering. The most important achievement was his successful mastery of the unique wilderness transformation secret technique of the Druids of Azeroth. In this era, the Druid sect in Azeroth was still in its infancy and far from forming the rigorous specialization division system it would have in later generations. Even the prestigious Cenarian Council had not yet taken shape at this time. However, even in this early period of chaos, many druids showed a strong interest in transformation. They longed to transform into various beasts and integrate more closely with nature. These pioneers undoubtedly laid a solid foundation for future feral druids who would specialize in shape-shifting combat. Unlike the wild transformation methods mastered by Ethan, the druids of Azeroth draw power and wisdom from various wild demigods. For example, some druids choose to seek advice from the majestic bear demigod Ursoc, thereby learning how to transform into a powerful giant bear. Others seek guidance from Aviana, the soaring bird demigod, and master the art of transforming into a storm crow. Each transformation represents a deep connection with a different wilderness demigod. Of course, Malfurion had taken the lead in completing that arduous task, so his descendants no longer needed to travel long distances and venture deep into the unpredictable forest to find those wild demigods whose movements are erratic. They only needed to humbly seek advice from their mentors in the Druid Order to obtain the wisdom of nature. However, seeking instruction directly from the demigods of the wilderness has its own unique advantages. Those ancient gods of the wilderness generously bestow their unique power of transformation to devout druids in the form of blessings. This power transcends the shackles of level and allows druids to exhibit their unique abilities when transforming. In addition, although these transformed forms given by the wild demigods may not be comparable to the magical creatures that Ethan is proficient in terms of attributes and spellcasting abilities, they contain the essence of wildness. This essence allows the druid to surpass the thick beasts after transforming. For example, the giant bear transformation inherited from the great Ursoc is powerful enough to crush 10 transformations learned from ordinary bears. With abilities like Instinct, Wild Charge, and Wild Heart, specially designed for wilderness transformation, Ethan's combat effectiveness was formidable. After completing the crucial task of rescuing Tyrande, Ethan already had a new plan in mind. He intended to take advantage of the rare opportunity of demigods Gat, pairing together to visit the legendary wilderness demigods one by one. He hoped that through communication with these ancient gods, he could further enrich his transformation forms and enhance his ability to adapt to various environments. During his druid practice, Ethan also deeply studied the star and moon spells unique to the druids of Azeroth, such as Moonfire and Starfall, as well as many other healing spells. Of course, Fandral also gained a wealth of magical knowledge from Ethan. His main gain was enriching his spell pool. Ethan's unique insights and broad vision made Fandral realize that the concept of nature was far larger and more complex than they had previously imagined. It not only covered the brilliance of the stars and the moon, the vitality of animals and plants, but also the vastness of the sky, the thickness of the earth, the depth of the ocean, and the infinite mysteries of the 4 elements: earth, water, fire, and air. This realization enlightened Fandral, making him understand that the power of druids went far beyond summoning the stars and moon and controlling animals and plants. They could also control the 4 elements and release spells that could devastate the world, like firestorm and earthquake. Even within the scope of traditional druid magic, Fandral discovered many untouched areas. For example, transformation was not limited to systemic changes such as wilderness transformation, but also included various special and local transformations of oneself, such as magic tooth technique and wild power. These transformation techniques were like keys that opened the door to a new world, allowing druids to respond to various challenges in a more flexible and adaptable way. Compared to Malfurion, who adhered to tradition, Fandral at this time could still be called a young man, full of energy and always carrying a sense of exploration and curiosity about unknown things. He was also more receptive to new ideas. However, despite his enthusiasm for Ethan's druid magic, he did not possess Ethan's amazing talent. Therefore, in just a few days of communication, although Fandral hurriedly dabbled in 4 or 5 new spells, he failed to systematically master their essence as expected. Despite this, Fandral was still very satisfied. He knew very well that the spell system created by Ethan's self-taught methods was not only significantly different from the druid system they were familiar with, but also contained the potential to bring about earth-shaking changes to the druid order. He firmly believed that Ethan's wisdom and talent would become an important force in promoting the druid order to glory. Before parting, Fandral held Ethan's hand tightly and said sincerely, "Brother Ethan, I deeply admire your talent and insight. I sincerely look forward to your return after completing your mission. Your wisdom will be a valuable asset to our Druid Order." Of course, Ethan agreed. Hapt Chapter 709, No Warning Received. Saying goodbye to Maev and Fandral, Ethan embarked on the journey to the front line. He understood the importance of this trip very well. Both the phoenix form and the feathered serpent form were too eye-catching, so he chose a more discreet transformation. Ultimately, he transformed into the Chimera's eagle form, spread his wings, and flew high towards the war-torn front line. Looking down from the air, he could see the scene on the ground in its entirety. In the capital Isolin, or the area centered on the Well of Eternity, the corruption of evil energy was like the tentacles of darkness, eroding this once prosperous land step by step. The Well of Eternity, which was originally surrounded by green trees, was now desolate, and the trees had disappeared without a trace. In the center of the well, demons were still constantly spewing out. The soil that was once full of vitality had now become dry and barren, and even the last trace of life and vitality had been taken away. This scene made Ethan feel heavy in his heart. In the air, a large number of evil bats and doomsday guards were patrolling. Their presence made the Burning Legion's defense as impregnable as an iron wall. As a result, it was almost impossible for him to break through such a defense line from the air. In contrast, not far outside the east gate of Aesilin, over a dense forest, many colorful birds were soaring alertly. They either shuttled lightly among the treetops or hovered proudly in midair, like an army guarding nature. Occasionally, several large two-headed chimeras would also join them. Their majestic posture and unique two-headed shape undoubtedly added a bit of mystery and power to this team. Speaking of chimeras, although the chimeras in Azeroth share the same name as those in the Harry Potter world, they have completely different appearances and characteristics. The chimera here is not the kind of stitched monster made up of different biological parts, but an elegant and majestic two-headed dragon. They are covered with gorgeous feathers and have two heads standing proudly. They are the guardians of nature. Like elven dragons and dryads, chimeras are also known as nature's allies. Under the call of Cenarius, these powerful creatures gathered from all corners of Kalimdor, providing huge help to the Night Elves' front advancement. Their addition greatly enhanced the Night Elves' aerial power. In the center of this flock of birds, a figure was particularly eye-catching. It was a half-human, half-bird creature covered in snow-white feathers. She flapped her wings gently, floating gracefully in midair. Her face was beautiful and mysterious, with the delicate facial features of a female night elf, and most of her body also showed similar characteristics to that of a night elf. However, her hands had a pair of sharp claws, which seemed capable of easily tearing apart any enemy. A pair of snow-white wings extended from her upper arms, allowing her to fly freely in the air, and her legs from the calf down gradually changed into the shape of bird claws, giving her greater strength and flexibility. Judging from the way she was surrounded by birds, this strange creature was undoubtedly the leader of this team of birds. In the blue sky, a majestic large raptor was approaching the lively gathering place of birds at an alarming speed. The stature of this big bird was eye-catching, with a body length of about 1 meter, showcasing its majestic physique. When it flew, its fully extended wings were even more spectacular, with a wingspan of more than 2 meters. However, the most attractive feature was the distinctive feathers on the back of its neck. They were lanceolate and distinct from other feathers. Under the sunlight, these feathers shimmered with brilliant golden light, shining like gems inlaid on the body of a raptor. This unexpected and unfamiliar raptor naturally attracted the attention of the flock of birds. They all looked sideways, curiously observing this uninvited guest. Even the strange Halfma, half-bird leader, turned her gaze towards the newcomer. The creature couldn't help but cast its gaze over, its intelligent eyes shining with curiosity and vigilance. "Oh, look who is here!" the half-human, half-bird creature whispered to itself, an inexplicable excitement in its voice. "A druid? This form is really rare and interesting." She glanced at the raptor lightly, her glowing eyes seeming to penetrate all appearances. Under her gaze, the true identity of the raptor was revealed. It was not a real bird, but a flying form transformed by a druid. However, most ordinary druids choose to change into common birds such as owls or crows. Raptors like this one are typically the domain of raptor druids who specialize in the forms of eagles and hawks. It is indeed very uncommon. It's no wonder that the half-human, half-bird creature is so interested in this. In fact, the eagle soaring among the blue sky and white clouds is Ethan Kuya's transformation. He waved his powerful wings, and in a majestic and elegant manner, he slowly approached the group of birds that seemed a little restless due to the strange visitors. In midair at a moderate distance, Ethan stopped flapping his wings and hovered steadily. His sharp eagle eyes stared deeply at the half-human, half-bird woman. A harpy? No, there is no ferocious and cruel look in her eyes like a harpy. Ethan frowned slightly, thinking to himself. Could it be that? Although her appearance is somewhat similar to that of a harpy, the aura of peace, tranquility, and sacredness that radiates from her is completely different. Ethan could clearly feel these qualities emanating from her through his psychic powers. They were like warm sunshine, gently falling on his heart. What surprised Ethan even more was that he found the eagle he had transformed into had an instinctive urge to get closer to her, as if he was attracted by some mysterious power emanating from her. Based on this alone, he could easily determine her identity. Under her curious and friendly eyes, Ethan felt as if he had been seen through. He took a deep breath and nodded to her in a solemn yet polite manner. "Dear Lady Aviana, the mother of birds and messenger of Elune," Ethan's voice echoed in the air. "Druid Ethan Kuye pays my respects to you." Aviana, known as the mother of birds, is one of the demigods who lives in the wilderness of Hyjal. The Garnier tree where she resides is known as the mother tree of the world of Azeroth. Its top towers into the clouds, as if it can touch the edge of the sky. Rumor has it that Aviana is the messenger sent to the material world by the moon goddess Elune. During the ancient war, she relied on her unrivaled flying speed to shuttle between demigods and mortal armies, delivering important messages. Her appearance is often accompanied by hope and a turning point, causing earth-shaking changes in the war situation. Ethan didn't know if this legend was true, and Elune never mentioned these past events to him. But in this world full of mystery and unknown, he would rather believe in these legends. After all, at least calling her by another title wouldn't offend anyone, not to mention that the person in front of him is a demigod. Aviana slowly flapped her snow-white wings as if to show her friendliness and goodwill to Ethan. She felt Ethan's respectful attitude, and a pleased smile appeared on her face. She nodded and said, "Hello, Ethan. Looking at your dusty appearance, are you reinforcements from the rear camp? But why are you alone?" Ethan, who was about to ask about Malfurion's whereabouts, was stunned. He couldn't understand Aviana's meaning for a moment. He originally thought Aviana would know Malfurion's whereabouts, but he didn't expect that she would ask him instead. However, he quickly reacted and replied, "Ah yes, I came from the rear camp. I am alone because I received a special mission and need to act independently." After hearing Ethan's response, Aviana's expression softened, and she seemed to understand the situation better. Avina's originally gentle Fac, he gradually turned serious. "Didn't you receive the warning from the children I sent?" There was a hint of urgency in her voice. Ethan was stunned for a moment, then shook his head and said, "Warning? We have not received any relevant news." As he answered, he felt a sudden unease, and his eyes instinctively turned towards the frontline camp below. In his imagination, this pioneer camp, which gathered many demigods and their families, should have been vibrant and bustling, like a wild zoo. However, the dense jungle was unusually quiet at this moment, so quiet that it almost felt oppressively silent. "Please forgive me for being rude," he apologized hastily to Avina. In a flash, he descended into the woods like a meteor. Avina followed closely behind, her lips pursed, her heart clearly full of doubts and worries. When Ethan landed, he immediately shifted from his flying form back to his night elf form, his eyes scanning the surroundings solemnly. In the vanguard camp, only a sparse number of night elves and wounded soldiers remained. None of the powerful demigods, Malfurion, or other high-end combat forces were in sight. Combined with the information Avina had revealed earlier, Ethan couldn't help but feel an unpleasant premonition. At that moment, Avina's voice sounded from behind. What exactly happened? Did the camp really not receive any relevant warning? Ethan listened to her, and his uneasiness grew stronger. He immediately interrupted Avina. Ms. Avina, please allow me to speak frankly. I suspect that the Burning Legion has set a trap for the Vanguard army. We must take immediate action just in case. I finally came back from my trip and resumed the third update. Chapter 710, The Battlefield of Demigods. When Ethan hurriedly arrived at the frontline camp and began to understand the current war situation in depth, a billowing dust cloud rose on the distant horizon. This dust was like a huge yellow dragon, rising up with the violent shaking of the earth. A thrilling battle was obviously taking place more than 100 kilometers west of the camp. On the dusty battlefield, several demigods as tall as mountains took the lead. They led a large group of wild animal warriors, making deafening howls, and launched a tide-like charge towards the demon front. Although these warriors had different shapes, their eyes shone with the same hatred and determination, vowing to completely eradicate the demons that polluted the forest. The leader was a male creature with a humanoid upper body and a majestic deer body on the lower half. "You defilers of the forest," he proclaimed, holding his head high and opening his hands vigorously. "Filthy demons, now feel the endless anger of nature." As his shouts echoed, a green light full of life slowly rose from his hands. This light was as dazzling as the rising sun, covering the surrounding world with a layer of vibrant green. The surrounding forest seemed to respond to his command, undergoing earth-shaking changes. Towering ancient trees pulled up their thick roots from the ground one after another. With the rustling sound of leaves, they gradually deformed and stood up, transforming into a group of super-enhanced ancient tree people. These tree men were towering and tall, like giants guarding the forest. They waved their newly formed wooden arms and smashed into the demon group with thunderous momentum. Boom! A deafening noise sounded immediately, as if even the heavens and earth were shaking. In the face of this powerful force, the once arrogant demons fell to the ground wailing, like small insects hit by a giant hammer. This powerful force not only killed many demons but also made the ground tremble, successfully attracting the attention of the Burning Legion and disrupting their position. At this moment, a deafening hum suddenly came from the rear of the battlefield. With this roar, a giant wild boar with purple runes and thorn vines all over its body suddenly rushed out. Its huge body was like a moving hill, and the two sharp fangs protruding from the corners of its mouth shone with a cold light, as if they could tear apart any enemy that stood in its way. The giant wild boar charged towards the Burning Legion's position at an alarming speed, like a heavy tank rampaging on the battlefield. Its powerful impact sent large groups of demons flying, and then its thick trotters mercilessly trampled them into pulp. For a moment, the screams of the demons and the sound of the boar's trotters trampling on the ground intertwined, forming a sad symphony. Under the command of several Eridar wizards, the Burning Legion quickly adjusted their tactics and focused their firepower on this desperate wild boar. However, their attacks were as ineffective as throwing mud into the sea. Whenever a demon attacked at close range, they were injured by the thorns entangled on the wild boar, forcing them to keep a certain distance to attack. This was the boar's signature talent, the power of Thorn's halo. Despite this, the Burning Legion did not give up. They constantly adjusted their attack rhythm and methods, trying to find a way to break through the giant wild boar's defense. The giant wild boar did not show any weakness. It relied on its strong defense and impact to run rampant in the Burning Legion's position. Agamagan, good job. Following this exciting cry, two giant bears followed up with steady and powerful steps. They rushed into the enemy's formation like two sharp knives, exploiting the gap opened by the wild boar demigod Agamagan. With their iron-tough fur and razor-sharp claws, they tore apart the Burning Legion's formation with force. The front line of the Burning Legion seemed to be in a panic under this sudden onslaught. However, Archimonde, who was watching the battle from the Well of Eternity, still maintained his composed posture, with his hands folded in front of his chest as if he had everything under control. He snorted softly, and a sarcastic smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Humph! These so-called demigods are indeed here," Archimonde remarked. He turned to look at the tall and ferocious demon beside him, and immediately issued an order. "Manaroth, now is the time for you to show your strength. I appoint you as the Vanguard General to lead Machar, Khazroga, Haka, Kazakh, and other senior generals. Let me see you crush them." After speaking, he stretched out his blue fingers and slowly scratched the whiskers on his chin, a sinister and cunning smile on his face. As long as these so-called strongest demigods in Azeroth are killed, the remaining mortals are just lambs to be slaughtered. Manaroth, a huge four-legged demon as big as Agamaggan, hammered his chest heavily, pride and complacency evident on his ferocious and ugly face. He growled, "Lord Archimonde, trust me with this task. I will completely destroy those demigods." Archimonde nodded slightly, applauding his confidence. "Please feel free to leave it to me, Archimonde." At the same time, although the demigod army rushed into the enemy's formation, like a strong wind sweeping away fallen leaves, Malfurion, who was commanding from the rear, felt an indescribable irritation. The archdruid, with green beard and hair, had now transformed into a purple stormcrow. He flapped his wings and looked at the battle ahead from the air. Malfurion's brows furrowed, and his eyes flashed with doubt. Something is wrong. The resistance of the Burning Legion is too weak. They seem to be deliberately luring us deep into the battlefield. There must be a trap, he muttered to himself. Thinking of this, Malfurion began to regret leaving Avina in the frontline camp to support the main army. The demigods were leading their families deep into the enemy's formation, and the connection between them was becoming weaker and weaker. He knew very well that this was the biggest drawback when demigods fought together. Every demigod was proud and confident. They would rather fight alone than lower themselves to cooperate with other demigods. When Jared was commanding on the front line before, he could rely on the demigod messenger Avina to convey further orders to the demigods charging into the battle. For the sake of being demigods, they would still carry out the orders conveyed by Avina. However, at this moment, Malfurion did not have this advantage. He felt as if he was isolated from this chaotic battlefield, unable to effectively command and coordinate the actions of the demigods. This sense of inadequacy and frustration intensified his irritability. Has the worry about Tyrande really clouded my calmness and reason? Malfurion, in his Stormcrow form, asked himself angrily. He flapped his wings violently, the sound of breaking through the air echoing as if to shake off his irritable mood. Finally, he decided to fly to the front line in person to deliver the message, and his first target was his respected mentor, Cenarius. In the mortal legion of the Vanguard army, Brox and Ronan, two battle-experienced warriors, looked at each other, and they could see deep worry in each other's eyes. The old orc warrior Brox hesitated for a moment and finally asked, "Ronan, have we fallen into the trap of the Burning Legion?" The human mage Ronan gave a helpless smile, spread his hands, and said, "Although I don't want to admit it, I'm afraid it is true. Brox, you have to be mentally prepared. This battle may be much more difficult than we imagined." Snort! When Brox heard this, his face revealed a ferocious determination. Ethan's fighting spirit surged as he hoisted the oak battle axe, imbued with the power of nature, onto his shoulders. With excitement in his voice, he exclaimed, "This is exactly what I want. Maybe today is the opportunity for glory that I've been seeking for so long." However, Ronan shook his head and replied in a deep, measured tone, "No, Brox, I don't think this will be the decisive battle. You should conserve your strength. The real test may still lie ahead." Chapter 711, Archimonde's Conspiracy. "Oh, that's the reason. It seems the situation is quite difficult." Ethan frowned in the Vanguard camp, pondering the various inside stories he had heard from Avina. The ins and outs of the matter were actually not complicated. Malfurion was worried about Tyrande's safety and did not want to sit still and wait for death. So, he planned to take advantage of the fierce battle between the demigod army and the demons to quietly cross the war-torn battlefield and sneak into the enemy's base camp to save his beloved Luna Priestess. Although this move was suspected of being unauthorized, it was unanimously supported by the demigods. Those demigods had been waiting for a long time and could no longer contain their fighting spirit. For them, being able to attack the enemy head-on was exactly what they wanted. These arrogant demigods had always been difficult to control. Even though they had previously made an oath to Commander Jared to obey the command in full view of the public, they both knew that that obedience was reserved. As demigods, they still valued strength too much, and Jared, the commander of the resistance, although he held a high position, was still a mortal body, not a great druid like Malfurion. Even Malfurion couldn't completely command the demigods, let alone Jared. Therefore, the only way Jared could command the demigods was to make the best of the situation and manipulate them. Although this method of commanding avoided conflicts with the demigods, it also had a huge flaw. He never truly gained full command authority and was unable to forcibly change the demigods' deep-rooted sense of autonomy, let alone issue orders that ran counter to their wishes. However, Malfurion was a sensible person and did not act blindly without permission. On the eve of the Demigod Legion's expedition, he still begged Avina to deliver news to the main camp where Jared was stationed, hoping that the main army could cooperate with the Demigod Legion and send reinforcements to the front line. In this way, with all 217 demigods attacking, Avina was entrusted by Malfurion with the important task of serving as the guardian of the vanguard camp, responsible for leading the heavy geese for support from the rear army. She immediately ordered her heirs to send this important information to the camp. However, for some unknown reason, the messenger bird failed to deliver the message. Based on the current situation, I guess. Ethan frowned, unconsciously rubbing his chin with his fingers, and said thoughtfully, "It is very likely that the Burning Legion did it secretly. The messenger you sent to deliver the message was intercepted and killed. Their purpose is probably to take this opportunity to catch all our demigods in one go." Hearing this, Avina's eyes suddenly flashed with a sharp, cold light. She raised her head angrily and made a sharp and passionate bird call to the sky. "Cunning devil, your plot will never succeed." Immediately afterwards, Avina flapped her wings violently and soared from the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust. She quickly flew high into the sky and at the same time ordered Ethan, "I will now go to the main camp in person to convey this news to Jared. Ethan, you take my children to the front line immediately and inform the other demigods of the Burning Legion's conspiracy. They must be careful and guard against it." Before Ethan could respond, Avina's wings flapped violently again, and her figure instantly disappeared from the sky. Only the explosions that broke through the speed of sound came from high in the sky, echoing in the empty wilderness. "The mother of birds is indeed impatient." Ethan shook his head with a wry smile, looked up at the direction where Avina disappeared, and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. "But I hope she can arrive in time to deliver the news to Jared. If my guess is true, then the ambush will appear soon. If we want to avoid casualties among the demigods, we must act quickly." The demigods, the reinforcements, needed to race against time. Although Agamagan, a wild boar demigod, is often misunderstood by people who think his intelligence is lacking, in reality, this demigod is not only far from stupid, but also quite witty at times. Just like now, he is rampaging through the Burning Legion's position, advancing like an unstoppable whirlwind. However, as the battle deepened, Agamagan gradually noticed something was wrong. The enemy's resistance seemed too weak. Compared to the previous demon armies led by generals and well-trained, this was a world of difference. The wolf god Goldrin, who was also roaming the battlefield, noticed this keenly. He looked around and found that, although there were many demons defending frontally, most of them were vulnerable cannon fodder units and lacked real combat experience. Goldrin couldn't help frowning, feeling uneasy in his heart. He turned around and saw the big black panther Ashaman not far away, who didn't seem to realize this and was still advancing into the depths of the Burning Legion without fear. "Ashaman, stop!" Goldrin shouted hurriedly, trying to stop this brave but somewhat reckless comrade. "You are not a thick-skinned guy like Ursoc and Tortora. Don't rush too hard. Stop quickly. We have to replan." However, Ashaman seemed to turn a deaf ear and continued to charge forward in her own way. Her figure shuttled among the demon army, taking a life with every kill. "Tsk! How come this guy is still so stubborn? Goldrin couldn't help complaining. He's so stubborn. Demigods are not born demigods. All demigods were once just ordinary beasts, but later they either had adventures, were enlightened by divine creatures, or unexpectedly possessed extraordinary understanding. Over a long period of time, they gradually became demigods. Therefore, even demigods have a period of relative weakness, and their experiences during that period often affect their character after becoming demigods. Ashaman, the Black Panther demigod, experienced a brutal attack by a pack of wolves when she was young. This unforgettable memory made her deeply resentful and repulsive towards the wolf clan, and she even harbored feelings of animosity towards fellow demigods. Even the god Goldrin could not rid her of the grudge in her heart. Among all the demigods, Ashaman and Goldrin are undoubtedly the two most aloof. Ashaman always lives alone and rarely communicates with other demigods. She wanders in the vast wilderness all day long, enjoying hunting. Those trolls who once ruled Kalimdor regarded her as an easy target and tried to hunt down this aloof demigod many times. Fortunately, Ashaman was very capable and good at sneaking, which led to their every operation ending in failure. But even so, Ashaman did not ask for help from other demigods. By herself, she not only successfully escaped the trolls' siege, but also often seized the opportunity to launch a fierce counterattack, killing those trolls who dared to provoke her. Goldrin, on the other hand, is like a real wolf, maintaining his innate wildness and vigilance. He instinctively keeps a distance from other demigods and mortals, guarding his territory from infringement. Once someone dares to step into his forbidden territory, the wolf god will attack without hesitation, using his sharp claws and rapid speed to tear the intruder into pieces. But the wolf is a social animal after all. Unlike the Black Panther, the wolf god Goldrin still has the minimum social skills and team awareness from his experience as a member of the wolf pack. Although these two demigods are withdrawn and work independently, their attack power is outstanding. Their movements are agile and flexible, and they can always display amazing strength in battle. On the contrary, their defense is their weakness. Jared, who knew this well, tailored a set of tactics for them, wandering around the outer circle of the battlefield, using their speed and attack power advantages to deal fatal blows to the enemy while avoiding direct confrontation. Avoiding a frontal fight, the demigods strategized among themselves. A loud eagle cry pierced the sky. Goldrin looked up and saw the eagle demigod Onhara flying high, leading his followers in a fierce battle against the evil bats and other aerial troops. Under Onhara's fierce offensive, demon corpses fell like raindrops, creating a thrilling scene. At the same time, the Stormcrow, transformed by Malfurion, quickly flew over to Cenarius. This forest demigod was exerting his powerful natural abilities with all his strength. Thick thorns and vines surged from the ground, tightly binding the nearby demons. "Teacher!" Malfurion made a graceful turn in the air, landed lightly on the ground, and transformed back into his human form. His face was full of anxiety, clearly indicating he had something important to report. Cenarius, though busy, glanced at his proud disciple and frowned slightly. "What's wrong, Malfurion? Are reinforcements coming?" "No, teacher," Malfurion replied solemnly, shaking his head. "Please listen to me. We may have fallen into the trap of the Burning Legion." Cenarius knew Malfurion's character well and understood that he was not one to make baseless claims. The word trap sent an ominous premonition surging through his heart. He immediately stopped casting spells, turned to Malfurion, and asked in a deep voice, "What trap? What did you find? Tell me what's going on." Roar! Just as Malfurion was about to elaborate, a deafening roar came from the rear of the long line of demigods. This roar was like thunder, shaking the entire battlefield. The surrounding primitive jungle fell in pieces amidst the roar, as if an invisible ancient giant beast was rampaging through the woods, unstoppable. Green flames of evil energy penetrated from the gaps in the gradually sparse woods, reflecting the ferocious figure of the devil. The next moment, a bulky demon with tattered wings rushed out of the forest. He brandished a huge double-headed spear, and with every swing, a large number of soldiers from the vanguard camp fell into pools of blood. His appearance was like a destructive force, sweeping across the entire battlefield. Weak demigods of Azeroth, facing the powerful Manaroth, you will have nowhere to escape, the demon roared, his voice full of arrogance and contempt. I will be your mourner, burying you completely in this battlefield that belongs to us. All troops, attack! Following his order, elite demon troops poured out like a tide from the forest behind the demigod army. Composed mainly of demon guards and doom guards, they were numerous and powerful in combat. In a short period, they cut off the demigod's retreat and formed an impenetrable encirclement. These long-awaited elite troops cooperated with the demon forces in the front, who began to counterattack, trapping the demigods firmly on the battlefield. They were like the most cunning hunters, cruelly forcing their prey into despair. The high-ranking demon generals, who had never been seen before, also appeared one after another and immediately identified their targets. They led the troops from behind and broke into the weakly defended flanks of each demigod's family, as easily as a sharp blade cutting through soft butter. The ill-prepared rebels suffered heavy casualties under this sudden onslaught, and blood stained the entire battlefield. Chapter 7:12, Cenarius vs. Manaroth. It's too late. Malfurion's face was as pale as paper. His eyes stared at the tragedy unfolding before him. He watched countless lives disappear, powerless to stop it, guilt gnawing at his heart. Regret consumed his soul like a relentless beast. Never give up hope. Cenarius's voice boomed in Malfurion's ears like spring thunder, jolting him from his despair. Seeing the dire situation, the forest demigod immediately activated his power, summoning the forces of nature on a grand scale. The natural energy, like warm sunshine, began to envelop the entire battlefield. Nature will heal our wounds and give us the power of rebirth, the rainmaker of serenity. Cenarius's voice rang out, and as he chanted, rain began to fall within a radius of several miles, centered around him. The raindrops touched every soldier, and the rebels soon discovered that their wounds were healing rapidly. The fatigue from the fierce battle dissipated, and the flame of fighting spirit rekindled in their eyes. They fought with renewed vigor and bravery. This was the power of demigods. The difference between gods and humans lay in their control over the laws of nature. Mortals, upon reaching legendary status, would gradually understand these laws, or the power of domains. Demigods, however, could directly control these laws. Cenarius mastered the domains of plants, protection, revival, stars, and had even touched upon the domain of nature. However, the scope of nature was too broad, and he had only glimpsed its depths. With his mastery of revival, Cenarius excelled at recovery spells. The healing power he summoned allowed many soldiers to exchange injuries with the demons. Thanks to everyone's efforts, the defense line temporarily stabilized. Ha! At that moment, Manaroth's arrogant laughter echoed. He raised his hand and smashed a poor dryad into a pulp, pointing his double-headed spear directly at Cenarius. Only the weak place their hope in the power of healing. The truly strong pursue destruction, annihilation, and more destruction. You weak demigods, let me teach you what true power means. What a shame, Cenarius snorted coldly. He recognized this as a challenge and was unafraid of Manaroth's provocation. With a gesture, thorns and vines sprang forth like serpents, ensnaring and killing the demons, dragging them into the earth to be buried alive. This was the natural outcome of their provocation. After clearing away the lesser demons, Cenarius pointed at Manaroth. I want to see how you filthy defilers can defeat the will of the forest and nature. Cenarius's voice grew louder. Atone for your evil deeds now. Stars fall. According to legend, Cenarius was the descendant of the moon goddess Elune. Though this was merely a legend, it spoke to Cenarius's mastery in the domain of stars. As he finished speaking, countless star-like rays of light descended from the sky. Each ray contained destructive power, striking the demons with fierce intensity. Several kilometers away, Ethan's eyes pierced through the layers of forest, drawn to the meteors appearing in the distant sky. Under the caster's subtle control, these meteors gathered neatly like guided missiles, crashing down upon the designated area with relentless force. Could this be the effect of the spell Falling Stars? Ethan murmured to himself, his eyes sparkling with excitement and curiosity. He noticed that although the visual effects of this spell were quite similar to the stars falling summoned by the moon god priest, the nature of the power used by the two was vastly different. As the ultimate killer move of Druid balance spells, Star's Fall is unparalleled in terms of power and difficulty. For ordinary Druids with mediocre talents, it takes several years of in-depth study and unremitting effort to initially master this spell. However, even if they successfully master Star's Fall, the effect they exert is often as insignificant as the brilliance of a grain of rice compared to the radiance of the bright moon Tiu Ethan sees in front of him at this moment. The difference is as vast as that between clouds and mud. Ouch! Just as Ethan was immersed in this shocking spell, an angry howl of pain suddenly erupted from the area where the meteor fell. The sound was like the cry of a wild animal, full of pain and unwillingness. Immediately afterward, a stream of evil flames soared into the sky, erupting from that area and destroying most of the meteors in the endless sea of fire. At the same time, near Ethan, the demonic aerial legion pressed down on the city like black clouds, frantically besieging the raptor warriors led by the eagle demigod Anhara. In the raging war, Ethan shuttled gracefully around the edge of the battlefield. However, his arrival did not escape the sharp gaze of the devil. 3 doomsday guards, smelling new prey, grinned and changed their direction, rushing toward him with their swords waving. Ethan knew he shouldered the important task of delivering a message, and this was not the time for a fight. He flapped his wings and nimbly turned in the air, avoiding the fatal slashes of the Doom Guard, and then cut through the sky like a meteor, accelerating once again toward the depths of the battlefield. However, even so, Ethan could not avoid getting involved in disputes. This was not because his dodging skills were not superb. On the contrary, they were so exceptional that they attracted more and more attention from the demons. Anhara, who was at the center of the fierce battle, couldn't help but cast a concerned glance, trying to discern the true identity of this uninvited guest. Seeing that the road ahead was blocked by demons, Ethan sighed and made a decisive choice. Since there was no way to avoid fighting, he would fight quickly. The next moment, the eagle he had transformed into suddenly folded its wings in midair and slid rapidly toward the ground in a swooping attitude. The demons behind him immediately followed suit. At the moment when the evil bats and doomsday guards were approaching, he suddenly opened his wings, and a rising air current instantly supported his body, slowing his fall abruptly. At the same time, his eyes suddenly lit up, as if 2 cold rays of light were shining at the enemy. "Do you think it's great that you can fly? I'll let you fly as much as you can." With an angry roar, the power of the soul suddenly erupted with Ethan as the center, spreading quickly like ripples. The demons affected by this power suddenly screamed in agony. They seemed to feel the pain of being ruthlessly torn deep in their souls. The pain penetrated deep into their bones, making them unable to extricate themselves. Group my explosion. Enjoy this feast of souls. Under the impact of this force, a large number of demons felt as if they were hit hard by a giant hammer. They could not bear the pain, as if their brains were exploding. Their hearts fell into a blank state that lasted for dozens of seconds, as if they were swallowed by endless darkness, and all thoughts and actions came to a standstill at this moment. What's worse is that a second ago, these demons were concentrating on chasing the swooping Ethan, but they did not expect the sudden change. In this brief absence, they even forgot, or, in other words, did not have the consciousness at all to control themselves to flap their wings. The result was that they fell from the sky at a speed much faster than normal, like broken wires. For a moment, the battlefield was filled with the sounds of continuous collisions and fractures. These once arrogant and domineering demons were now in a miserable state with broken bones and muscles. Ethan, who had escaped the pursuit, finally had a moment to catch his breath. He looked up at the center of the battlefield, where the fighting was extremely fierce. Like an unyielding warrior, Cenarius alone resisted the fierce attack of a fat and bulky 4-legged demon. The movement caused by their battle was shocking, as if even heaven and earth were about to burst. As the centerpiece of the demon's attack, Cenarius stood up to the fat and bulky 4-legged demon, and the sounds of their clash were very conspicuous. The ordinary soldiers of the resistance army evacuated the center of the battle in an orderly manner under the command of Malfurion. At this moment, they watched this earth-shattering battle nervously and anxiously. Everyone's face was full of worry and expectation. This is the sorrow of ordinary people and low-level professionals in the world of high magic. No matter how hard they try, the real key to the battlefield still lies with the top masters. The outcome of this battle between leaders would directly determine their life and death. Ethan recognized the fat demon at a glance. "Abyss Lord Manaroth," he murmured to himself, a trace of solemnity flashing in his eyes. So, his eagle eyes suddenly turned in the direction of Asaline. Although he could not see Archimonde, he could clearly feel the powerful aura hidden in the dark. Ethan knew that as one of the leaders of the Burning Legion, Archimonde must also be secretly watching the situation on the battlefield, ready to deliver a fatal blow at any time. This battle was no longer just a contest between Cenarius and Manaroth, but also a desperate struggle between Azeroth and the Burning Legion. Shua! Ethan deftly turned around in the air like a true kite and used Psychic Explosion to accurately hit several demonic air forces surrounding Aonhara. They seemed to be choked by invisible hands, instantly losing their fighting power and falling from the sky. This series of actions went smoothly, and Ethan easily got rid of the entanglement in the air, finally landing steadily in the area where Malfurion was. Upon seeing this, several senior leaders of the Druid sect immediately stood in front of Malfurion, raised their weapons, and stared warily at this strange bird they had never seen before. Their eyes were full of wariness and doubt, and someone asked, "Who are you? What is your purpose here?" "Hey, everyone, don't be so nervous, all right?" After Ethan landed, he immediately changed back to his human form, raised his hands helplessly, and said, "Do I really look like an enemy? It's a new month again. Please send me monthly votes, flowers, and evaluation votes. Thank you, everyone." Chapter 713, Love Rivals Meet. Malfurion couldn't help but be stunned for a moment when he saw Ethan Quaya's appearance. The current druids had not yet reached their peak development among the Night Elves. As the leader of the druids, Malfurion knew every one of them, but he had never seen a druid who looked like this. Ethan's appearance was different from that of the druids he was familiar with, which confused him. However, a purple-haired woman standing in front of Malfurion hesitated after seeing Ethan's face. She seemed to know something about Ethan and was trying to recall information about him at that moment. "Are you that? Ethan Quaya?" The purple-haired woman finally spoke, with a hint of uncertainty in her tone. "Maiev once mentioned you to me." When Ethan heard this, he felt a little surprised. He didn't expect that someone on this distant battlefield would actually know his name. He nodded and said with a smile, "Yes, I am Ethan Quaya. I didn't expect that there are also Maiev's acquaintances here." At the same time, Ethan was also observing this unique woman with bear-claw gloves on her hands. Although he did not find any specific memory about her in his mind, he relied on his keen insight. He was already somewhat certain about her identity as a female druid. Among night elves, women's career choices were typically mages, moon priests, or even hunters, but few chose to become druids. It would be 10,000 years before female druids appeared on a large scale. Therefore, among the top leaders of the druid sect, there were very few female members, and Coda Steelclaw, whose face was engraved with the traces of time and whose eyes were as firm as iron, was undoubtedly the most outstanding one among them. Not only was she a devout believer in Ursoc, the giant bear demigod, but she also had a close friendship with Maiev Shadowsong. Ethan had also heard this name from Maiev. "It's a blessing to meet you. Are you Miss Coda?" Ethan nodded slightly to her, to show respect. Coda Steelclaw nodded, responding to his greeting. Ethan then turned his attention to the druids around him. He noticed their curious or complicated looks, but didn't pay much attention to them. At this moment, he had more important news to convey. After a brief exchange of greetings, he cleared his throat and then said solemnly, "Everyone, I just rushed from the Pioneer camp and brought urgent news. The messenger that Miss Avina sent to the camp was attacked by unidentified enemies on the way and died. Before I set off, Miss Avina had decided to go to the camp in person and report to Commander Jared for help. Reinforcements will definitely come to support us, but due to this unexpected situation, I'm afraid their arrival time will be later than originally scheduled." Upon hearing the news brought by Ethan, Malfurion and several of his confidants breathed a sigh of relief. Archdruid Malfurion spoke happily, with a hint of relief in his tone. "Your arrival is really timely, Ethan. However, I am curious, why did you embark on the journey to the Vanguard camp alone?" Ethan shook his head slightly, with a deep look in his eyes. "This matter is a long story, but now is not the time to talk about it in detail. Our top priority is to solve the immediate crisis, and we can discuss it later." After saying that, he turned to look at the battlefield where Cenarius and Manaroth were fighting fiercely. A trace of worry flashed across his face, and he said in a deep voice, "Although I don't want to say such words that may damage our morale, we have to admit that Cenarius may not be a match for Manaroth the Destroyer in terms of strength. We must try to buy time for him, at least until reinforcements arrive." There was no contempt for Cenarius in Ethan's words. He just objectively analyzed the combat ability of the forest demigod. Compared with other powerful demigods, Cenarius did have a certain gap in absolute power. This could be seen from the field he held. The plant field was not actually good at close combat. It was more suited for the situation on the battlefield was far from favorable for Cenarius. Despite his valiant efforts and the formidable defenses he had erected, the sheer power and relentless aggression of Manaroth were beginning to take their toll. Cenarius's control over the vines and ancient tree warriors was impressive, but Manaroth's brute strength and the corrupting influence of his fell energy were proving to be formidable adversaries. The vines that wrapped around Manaroth were being torn apart with each violent movement, and the ancient tree men, though powerful, were being felled one by the Abyss Lord's devastating attacks. Cenarius's spells, while potent, seemed to have little effect on Manaroth's thick, fel-infused hide. The enhanced Nature's Wrath, the powerful Starfire, and even the ultimate druid balance spell, Star's Fall, only managed to create brief ripples on Manaroth's surface, failing to inflict any significant damage. The previous bombardment of stars falling had only served to enrage Manaroth further, making him even more ferocious in his assault. Manaroth's double-headed spear, glowing with malevolent green light, struck repeatedly at Cenarius's ironwood shield. Each strike sent shockwaves through the shield, causing it to shudder and crack. The green flames that ignited upon contact with the spear's edge were a constant threat, forcing Cenarius to remain vigilant and on the defensive. Realizing that his ranged spells were ineffective, Cenarius decided to engage Manaroth in close combat. With a roar of defiance, he charged at the Abyss Lord, his fingers transforming into sharp, emerald-green branches. These branches, a gift from the power of nature and Mother Earth's protection, glowed with a pure, vibrant energy that contrasted starkly with Manaroth's fell aura. Cenarius's movements were graceful, almost dance-like, as he struck at Manaroth with his branch-like hands. Each strike was precise and powerful, aimed at exploiting any weakness in Manaroth's defenses. Meanwhile, the thorn shield that rotated around Cenarius provided a nearly impenetrable barrier, blocking Manaroth's savage attacks and preventing him from landing a direct hit. Despite the ferocity of Manaroth's assault, Cenarius's thorn shield held strong, deflecting the Abyss Lord's blows and keeping him at bay. However, the battle was far from over, and the outcome remained uncertain. Cenarius knew that he could not afford to let his guard down, even for a moment. The fate of the battlefield, and perhaps the world, hung in the balance. As the most trusted vanguard general under Archimonde, Manaroth was a destroyer who had annihilated countless worlds. He was not merely a brute force galloping through battlefields. His cunning and cruelty were equally formidable. Seeing that Cenarius could not be easily defeated, a glint of malevolence flashed in Manaroth's eyes. Despite the pain of being pierced by the force of nature, Manaroth roared to the sky and raised his double-headed spear high above his head. In an instant, a massive surge of sickly green evil energy gathered at the tip of the spear, its power so immense that it dyed the entire sky an eerie green. Cenarius, now, witnessed the true power of Manaroth the Destroyer, he bellowed. Before he finished speaking, the double-headed spear in his hand struck at Cenarius with thunderous force. Boom! A deafening bang echoed across the battlefield. The ferocious stab of evil energy came as swiftly as lightning, hitting Cenarius head-on, leaving him no time to dodge. At this critical moment, Cenarius gritted his teeth and channeled all the natural power into his arms, crossing them over his chest in an attempt to withstand Manaroth's fatal blow. The two powerful forces collided fiercely in the air. The beams of evil energy clashed with the hastily erected natural barriers, each vying for dominance. The immense impact made Cenarius seem as if he were being repelled by an invisible giant wave. His four hooves, rooted in the earth, plowed several deep ravines into the ground, causing soil to fly away and smoke to fill the air. Chapter 714, Defending Against a Powerful Enemy. All heroes unite to fight, using clever tactics. Now, do it! Just as the two powerful figures remained locked in a stalemate and Cenarius could no longer hold on, a gentle and calm male voice suddenly broke the tension. Manaroth, who had been grinning ferociously, suddenly noticed a strange movement beneath his right hind leg. The once solid ground seemed to have been hollowed out by countless moles in an instant, becoming soft and fragile. For the Abyss Lord, whose weight was extraordinary, this sudden change was disastrous. His body immediately lost balance and began to lean to the right and rear. At this moment, the double-headed spear in Manaroth's hand was still emitting ferocious beams of evil energy. As his body tilted, the beam of light twisted and tumbled in the air like an out-of-control dragon, eventually floating upward. Some unfortunate eagles and evil bats that were brushed by the beam were turned into wisps of ash by the blazing evil energy almost instantly. This terrifying power made Malfurion and the others, who had just completed the assist, tremble. Only a powerful demigod like Cenarius could block Manaroth's violent attack head-on. For ordinary mortals like them, even a light brush with the beam would result in a fate no better than those vaporized eagles. As Manaroth's oppressive presence temporarily receded, Cenarius finally got a chance to breathe. During the brief respite, he glanced at the druids led by Malfurion. Although the faces of those young druids were full of exhaustion, the determination and bravery in their eyes remained undiminished. Cenarius felt a warm current in his heart and smiled, nodding to them to express his gratitude and encouragement. Through their cooperation, he had realized his own shortcomings. In this difficult battle, these druids were his most solid support. However, the cruelty of the battle did not ease because of this brief warmth. Manaroth's violent roar sounded again, and his eyes seemed to spurt scorching flames as he glared at Malfurion and the others. "You ants! How dare you attack the great Manaroth?" The Abyss Lord was clearly a character who sought revenge. He raised the two-handed spear in his hand, condensing a powerful blast of evil energy to vent his anger on the druids. But Cenarius would not sit back and watch his disciples and followers suffer such threats. "Demon, your opponent is me," he roared, standing up. At the same time, an ancient war tree, its entire body burning with evil green flames, rushed towards Manaroth, under Cenarius's control. The ancient tree, like a brave warrior, swung its huge fist and struck Manaroth's face hard. Although this attack successfully interrupted the Abyss Lord's assault, the ancient war tree itself was instantly reduced to ashes due to the excessive amount of evil energy it endured. But this sacrifice was worth it. It gave the druids a chance to breathe and precious preparation time for the next battle. The tone of the subsequent battle was thus set. With the coordinated assistance of Malfurion and other high-level druids, Cenarius faced the unfavorable situation and resisted Manaroth. Although dangers were always present, he managed to survive. He skillfully navigated the thin line between life and death and could suddenly counterattack in the gaps, causing Manaroth significant trouble. Although his attacks could not deal a fatal blow to Manaroth, the violent Pit Lord was still unable to kill Cenarius as he wished, thanks to the relentless harassment of the mortal druids. Manaroth was never a patient demon, and the current battle situation made him even more irritable. His anger, like ignited firewood, grew stronger and stronger, almost out of control. At the same time, other demigods on the battlefield were also engaged in fierce combat with powerful enemies. The warriors specially arranged by the Burning Legion, though temporarily at a disadvantage, displayed a tenacious fighting spirit, making it clear they would not be easily defeated. The entire battle fell into a stalemate, gradually turning into a tug-of-war. At this tense and intense moment, a sharp and loud bird song pierced the sky, instantly breaking through the gloom of the burning legion's encirclement. Immediately afterward, countless birds rushed into the battlefield, covering the sky like clouds. When Malfurion saw this scene, a trace of unconcealable joy flashed in his eyes. "It's Avina!" he shouted excitedly. "It seems she has successfully delivered the message, and reinforcements are coming. We have finally waited for this moment." Just as Malfurion expected, when countless birds fluttered high and launched a fierce attack on the Burning Legion's aerial troops, a desolate and distant horn sounded from the mountains and forests. As the horn echoed, a thundering war cry rolled in like thunder. A large number of trees swayed violently in the wind, and dust flew up, creating a magnificent scene of thousands of troops charging into battle. Manaroth, who was relatively simple-minded, could not understand the current situation for a while. Cenarius, whose morale was boosted, took advantage of the moment when his opponent was distracted to launch a counterattack. For the first time since the battle began, Manaroth was forced to retreat. His huge head turned slightly as he looked into the forest, unable to believe that Archimonde's ambush plan had failed and that they were now ambushed by the enemy. The shadowy night elf flags in the distant mountains and forests, along with the figures of the Black Panther Knights moving through the woods, confirmed their failure. Cenarius, whose morale was greatly boosted, seized this golden opportunity. He launched a sudden counterattack, repelling Manaroth with the force of thunder. This marked the first time Cenarius had the upper hand in their fight. At this moment, a Dreadlord flapped its wings and flew quickly to Manaroth's side, seemingly trying to calm the angry saboteur. Ethan, who had been observing the battlefield, also noticed the Dreadlord. He stared closely at the newcomer and narrowed his eyes slightly. "This is not Tichondrius, but where did this guy come from?" he wondered. In the previous battle, the Dreadlord had not appeared among the Burning Legion generals who fought fiercely with the demigods. Ethan, who had been watching all directions, had not glimpsed any trace of the Nathrazim in the Burning Legion formation. This unknown big bat looked more like... Suddenly, Ethan showed a look of astonishment. "Coming from the direction of the Pioneer camp? That's it. It all finally makes sense." He took a deep breath, feeling an inexplicable emotion in his heart. Now, he finally understood the truth behind the murder of Avina's messenger. This kind of cunning and insidious behavior was undoubtedly the specialty of the Nathrazim. "It's so abominable." At the same time, Manaroth roared unwillingly, his voice echoing over the battlefield like thunder. The terrifying sound waves spread outwards with the blessing of evil energy, like an invisible storm sweeping the entire battlefield. Mortals covered their ears under the impact, but they were still unable to resist the temporary pain of tinnitus and deafness. After venting his anger, Manaroth grasped his double-headed spear tightly and pointed the tip directly at Cenarius, Malfurion, and others, with fierce murderous intent flashing in his eyes, as if he wanted to kill all his enemies. Who dared to challenge him? In the current situation, it was nothing more than incompetence and rage. "You moths and ants, you are lucky today," he roared viciously. "But next time we meet on the battlefield, I swear to the great Sargeras that I will personally chop off your heads. Withdraw." After saying this, he waved his hand and gave the order to retreat. The soldiers and officers of the Burning Legion receded like a tide, rampaging all the way and breaking up the resistance forces blocking their path. Finally, after reuniting with the demonic troops on the frontal battlefield, Ethan and the others Owly withdrew from the war-torn battlefield. Hoochie, hoochie. After the battle, Malfurion was holding his staff and gasping for air. Although this was not his first confrontation with the Burning Legion, it was the first time he felt the powerful presence of those lord-level demons at such close range. Their violent strength, the crying evil energy, and every blow seemed capable of tearing him apart. At this moment, he felt like a small boat struggling against strong winds and waves, tired yet relieved. Fortunately, Jared's support arrived in time. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable, he murmured to himself, a trace of fear flashing in his eyes. However, a voice answered him. "No." Ethan walked out from the depths of the woods, waving a feather in his hand. The feather exuded a soft white light, like the brightest star in the night sky. He whispered, "The reinforcements from Miss Avina and Jared have not arrived." Before Miss Avina left, she temporarily handed over the power to lead the birds to me. "What you saw was just my bluff, trying to intimidate the enemy." Malfurion was stunned. He carefully thought about the battle just now. Indeed, although the birds that appeared in the sky were numerous and seemed densely packed, they were essentially just ordinary birds and did not have Avina's unique golden light. In other words, Avina did not really arrive. Moreover, even if Jared was notified by Avina and ordered his troops to set off immediately, they would not have been able to rush in quickly behind Avina. Since the attack horn and battle roar sounded, he had only seen the night elf flag waving in the distance and some Black Panther cavalry running, but until now, he had not seen a single soldier rush to him from the forest to join the fierce battle. All the noise and momentum seemed to be confined to that deep jungle. Chapter 7:15, Defeat the Enemy, Skillfully and Earn Praise. In fact, of all the signs, only the flying bird is real. This is the result of Ethan using the token left by Aviana to skillfully manipulate her loyal relatives. As for the march of the army, the magnificent scene of trees shaking violently, as if the earth was quaking, was not caused by real armies. Instead, Ethan cleverly used the power of manipulation of plants, supplemented by the power of earthquake technique, to create an astonishing effect. The waving flags and the mighty Black Panther cavalry were masterpieces of Ethan's exquisite illusion magic. With his extraordinary magical prowess, he created a large-scale illusion realistic enough to make the enemy believe they were facing a powerful army, instilling fear in their hearts. In short, Ethan relied on his spellcasting ability and resourcefulness to complete a tactical deception of every tree and plant. So that's it. Malfurion suddenly realized and sighed sincerely. Mr. Ethan left earlier to plan this ingenious strategy. Your wisdom and strength are truly remarkable. To come up with such a method to drive back the Burning Legion in such a short time is commendable. The surrounding druids also gathered around, giving Ethan warm applause and praise. To be honest, when Ethan left, they thought he was frightened by the dangerous battlefield and had fled, secretly despising him. Some even began to doubt the authenticity of Ethan's previous feats on the battlefield. At this moment, they felt deeply ashamed and admired Ethan. He not only proved his courage and wisdom with practical actions, but also gave them a deep understanding of what a real hero is. Now, the stories and achievements that happened to Ethan, which they once regarded as legends, have become more real and vivid in their hearts. As Garrett commented, "He always surprises people. I knew I saw you right. Entrusting the children to your leadership is undoubtedly the wisest decision I have ever made." Along with the warm and smiling praise, Avina's voice, as gentle as the spring breeze, came softly from above. Surrounded and greeted by many birds, she slowly landed in front of the druids, and the golden light filled the earth, bringing a bit of sanctity and tranquility to this land that had just experienced war. Avina's eyes wandered over Ethan, and then she praised, "Judging from today's performance, you have shown a level comparable to Jared's in terms of military exploits and battlefield strategies. I firmly believe that you also have the potential to become a leader of the coalition." Ethan smiled bitterly and nodded to her. "Miss Avina, you are overly complimentary. What I did was just a temporary measure in a desperate situation." However, deep in Ethan's heart, he had to admit that Avina's words held some truth. Coming from Blue Star, although he had never personally experienced the smoke and flames of this war, his knowledge of war theories and historical cases far exceeded that of ordinary people, at least much better than Jared. After all, humanity's 5,000 years of war history far surpasses that of the Night Elves, and the modern society, with its information explosion, has provided him with a wealth of information. In comparison, Jared, who was born as a minor official, had significant shortcomings in this regard. Combined with Ethan's extraordinary wisdom and understanding, he was also talented in military strategy. If he were allowed to serve as the commander of the coalition forces, he was confident he could do a better job than Jared. But Ethan also clearly recognized the gap between himself and Jared. He was not an officer, and he joined the resistance relatively late. He had not experienced a series of arduous wars like Jared. Therefore, he had not yet established sufficient prestige and trust in the minds of the grassroots. Of the ancients, Aunhara, the eagle demigod, had always been a symbol of unwavering strength and resilience. Seeing him now, struggling under the relentless assault of the flying demons, filled Ethan with a deep sense of unease. He knew that the morale of their forces was intricately tied to the presence and strength of their demigods. If Aunhara were to fall, it would be a devastating blow to their already precarious situation. Ethan turned his attention back to the conversation at hand. Archdruid Malfurion's words still echoed in his mind, but he pushed them aside for now. There were more pressing matters to address. He looked at Aviana, who was still calculating the arrival time of the reinforcements. "Ms. Aviana," Ethan began, his voice steady but urgent, "we need to ensure that Aunhara and the other demigods are protected until the reinforcements arrive. Their presence is crucial to our defense and to the morale of our troops." Aviana nodded, her expression serious. "You are right, Ethan. We must do everything in our power to protect them. I will coordinate with the other commanders to strengthen our defenses around the demigods." Cenarius, still holding Ethan's hand, added, "I will also lend my strength to this effort. We cannot afford to lose any of our key figures before the decisive battle." Ethan felt a surge of determination. Despite the overwhelming odds, he knew that they had to hold on. The fate of their world depended on it. He looked around at the faces of his comrades, each one showing signs of fatigue but also a fierce resolve. They were all in this together, and they would fight to the last breath to protect their home. "Thank you, Cenarius," Ethan said, his voice filled with gratitude. "Your support means a great deal to all of us." As they continued to discuss their strategy, the sounds of battle echoed in the distance. The demons were relentless, but so were they. Ethan knew that they had to stay strong, to believe in each other and in their cause. The reinforcements would arrive soon, and when they did, they would turn the tide of this war. For now, they had to hold the line. Ethan took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenges ahead. He was ready to face whatever came their way, alongside his friends and allies. Together, they would fight for their world, for their future, and for the hope that still burned brightly in their hearts. In the original history of the ancients, the eagle demigod Aunhara did not appear, though it was briefly mentioned that he participated in the war. This implies that he did not take part in the final battle. Similarly absent was the mysterious Black Panther demigod, Ashaman. Ethan guessed that, according to the original timeline, they would have fallen in this battle. In other words, history had indeed been altered. Of course, changing history is not always beneficial. Under the influence of the butterfly effect, Ethan's actions might inadvertently lead to the ancient war, which should have been won, ending in failure. However, despite facing numerous uncertainties, Ethan firmly believed that if he could manage to maintain a stalemate in this ambush battle, one that should have resulted in a significant loss for the Night Elves, it would be a considerable victory. After all, turning around such a dire situation is an achievement in itself. Retaining one or two more demigods for the resistance would undoubtedly be advantageous in the future. Chapter 16. Meeting Queen Ashara's invitation, saying goodbye to Tyrande, and praying to God. In the side hall of Queen Ashara's palace, a woman wearing a moon-white priest's robe sat quietly beside a large bed draped with purple transparent gauze. This was the 5th day she had been trapped here. Her eyes seemed a little blurred, and many maids holding weapons in the room watched her every move vigilantly. Ta! Ta! Crisp and rhythmic footsteps slowly echoed from the corridor outside the door, breaking the tranquility in the room. The maids immediately put away their weapons upon hearing the sound, lowered their heads respectfully, and faced the door that was about to open. Crunch! With a soft sound, the door slowly opened, and a thick but not overpowering fragrance wafted into the room, making everyone feel relaxed and happy. This aroma seemed to have a magical power, causing the green-haired priestess to open her eyes involuntarily. "Ha-ha! Look who is here!" A magnetic and charming female voice came from outside the door, with an indescribable attraction in her tone. As the words fell, a night elf with a joking smile walked into the room. Unlike all other night elves, she had a pair of dazzling golden pupils filled with unparalleled power. Her burning eyes seemed to penetrate all illusions, her appearance was unparalleled, and she exuded an elegant and majestic temperament. She was like a goddess born from the spiritual beauty of heaven and earth, breathtaking in her perfection. Although the green-haired priestess also had a beautiful appearance and a good figure, her orchid-like temperament was very attractive. However, in the presence of the night elf woman, all her advantages suddenly seemed overshadowed and dwarfed. High Priestess Tyrande Whisperwind, we meet again here. Is this scene beyond your expectation? Queen Ashara's voice contained a hint of jest, and her wicked golden eyes locked onto the priestess opposite her. But Tyrande's eyes remained as calm as a lake, with no ripples in sight. She met Ashara's gaze and said in a calm but firm tone, Queen Ashara, as time goes by, it's true that we haven't seen each other for a long time, but I must admit frankly that I don't feel any joy about this reunion, let alone any honor. Ha! Ashara chuckled and shook her head. You are still the same as before, young and stubborn, like a little hedgehog, unapproachable. As she spoke, she waved her hand gracefully, signaling the maids holding weapons to step aside temporarily. The remaining 10 maids stood respectfully beside her. This head maid was not only very heroic, but also possessed a beauty second only to Ashara and comparable to that of the priestess. However, her vigilant eyes were always fixed on Tyrande, as if she feared the high-ranking priestess might do something unexpected. Ashara, on the other hand, took all this in with a panoramic view and seemed to have already made a plan in her mind. With a surge of arcane energy, Ashara casually created a chair made of force field energy. She sat elegantly opposite Tyrande, her slender legs glowing with a light violet color, naturally folded together, outlining an alluring arc. This slightly uninhibited movement caused the white dress on both sides of her thighs to slip quietly, revealing a large area of radiant, jade-like skin. However, Ashara didn't seem to care about this. Her eyes were always fixed on Tyrande, as if she was expecting something. Many years ago, when you were baptized by High Priestess Dejana and officially joined the Sisters of Elune, I extended an invitation to you, Ashara said slowly. She leaned lightly on the armrest of the chair with her left hand, supporting the side of her face. Her eyes flashed with interest as she talked about the past to the holy priestess in front of her. To this day, I still maintain that original intention will continue to shield you from my reach. Her voice was a mix of curiosity and challenge, as if she relished the idea of a prolonged contest of wills. Tyrande remained steadfast, her eyes unwavering as she met Ashara's gaze. Your Majesty, my faith in Elune is unshakable. No matter what trials you present, I will not falter. Ashara's lips curled into a sly smile. We shall see, Tyrande. We shall see. She turned away, her regal demeanor never faltering, and gestured for Vashj to follow. Come, Vashj, we have other matters to attend to. Vashj cast one last, seething glance at Tyrande before obediently trailing after the queen. The tension in the room lingered even after they had left, a palpable reminder of the confrontation that had just taken place. Tyrande took a deep breath, her resolve hardening even further. She knew that her path would not be easy, but her devotion to Elune gave her strength. She whispered a silent prayer, feeling the comforting presence of her goddess envelop her. As she stood alone in the grand hall, the moonlight streaming through the windows cast a serene glow around her. Tyrande felt a renewed sense of purpose. She would face whatever challenges lay ahead with unwavering faith and determination. In the days that followed, Tyrande's life in the palace was a constant test of her resolve. Ashara's subtle manipulations and Vashj's open hostility were ever present, but Tyrande remained unyielding. She found solace in her nightly prayers to Elune, drawing strength from the goddess's unwavering support. One evening, as she knelt in quiet meditation, a soft voice interrupted her thoughts. Tyrande, you are stronger than I ever imagined. Startled, Tyrande looked up to see a figure bathed in moonlight. It was Elune herself, her presence filling the room with a divine radiance. Tyrande's heart swelled with reverence and gratitude. My goddess, she whispered, bowing her head, I am honored by your presence. Elune's voice was gentle, yet powerful. You have shown great courage and faith, my child. Continue to stand firm, and know that I am always with you. Tyrande felt tears of joy and devotion welling up in her eyes. I will, my goddess. I will never waver. With a final reassuring smile, Elun's presence faded, leaving Tyrande with a renewed sense of purpose. She rose to her feet, her heart filled with a fierce determination. No matter what trials lay ahead, she would face them with the strength of her faith and the support of her goddess. And so, Tyrande continued her journey, her spirit unbroken and her resolve unshaken, ready to face whatever challenges the future held. Vashj, we were wrong. Yes, Vashj replied, leaving the room right behind Ashara. Before exiting, she couldn't help but turn around and glare at Tyrande, her eyes filled with murderous intent. Immediately afterward, there was a loud bang as the door was slammed shut. Vashj sensed a potential threat from Ashara's attitude towards Tyrande. This threat made her wary, and she felt it necessary to warn Tyrande. However, Tyrande didn't even pay attention to Ashara, so how could she care about Vashj's threat? As Ashara and Vashj left, the armed maids who had previously been responsible for guarding Tyrande poured into the room again. The once peaceful side hall of the palace regained its calm. Tyrande sat on the edge of the bed, her posture upright and elegant, like a statue devoid of sorrow or joy. Her eyes were slightly closed, and she was immersed in her inner world. What had just happened and all the disturbances in the outside world had nothing to do with her. However, when her eyes inadvertently passed through the half-open window and fell on the lonely, missing moon in the night sky, a touch of sadness flashed across her face. She silently prayed to Elun in her heart, "O supreme moon goddess, may your light always shine on your people. I beg you, before my weak blessing dissipates, let the rescue I've been waiting for come as soon as possible." Then, her thoughts couldn't help but drift to the distance, and she thought of several of her friends, Ethan, Malfurion, and Illidan. She firmly believed that they would definitely get her out of this prison. However, as Shahrazad's palace was heavily guarded and full of dangers, she couldn't help but worry about their safety. So she prayed to Elun again, "Moon Goddess, please protect them so that they can come to me safely and smoothly. I don't want them to sacrifice themselves to save me. I just hope that we can be together again, reunited." Chapter 7 and 17. The Encher plot of Archdruid time passed minute by minute, and just before midnight, Jared finally led the vanguard troops to the battlefield in person. Ethan, who had been struggling to maintain his spells, finally breathed a sigh of relief. He retired successfully, leaving the battlefield to those who came after him. Jared had some complaints about the demigod vanguard's unplanned actions that led to the ambush. However, he knew that these demigods, who were naturally arrogant and possessed great power, were not ones he could punish at will. Therefore, he could only verbally advise them to restrain their restlessness to avoid falling into similar danger again. The situation on the battlefield was changing rapidly, and a single move could affect the entire strategy. Even a small change would have a series of subsequent effects. Due to the vanguard's unauthorized actions, Jared had to make corresponding adjustments. He decided to push the main army camp forward and expand the size of the previous vanguard camp to better cope with the coming battle. Although this decision was not his original intention, under the current circumstances, it was necessary. As a result, the resistance army passively approached Asaline step by step amid these changes. To those who knew little about battlefield strategy, advancing the front might seem like a positive move. However, to experienced generals like Jared and astute individuals like Ethan, who had a thorough understanding of the battle situation, things were far from simple. Before the army had a clear advantage, advancing the front rashly was tantamount to digging one's own grave. This would not only lengthen the fragile supply line and expose the army to the enemy's attack range, but also mean giving up the advantage of home battles and falling into a passive away battle. Such a strategic choice was akin to destroying the Great Wall and was definitely not a wise move. Jared knew this very well, but the reality of the situation left him no choice but to adopt this risky tactic. Meanwhile, in Malfurion's simple yet solemn tent, Ethan sat opposite the Archdruid. Although there was still a subtle tension between the two, as love rivals, they had no choice but to put aside their personal grudges and discuss major issues related to the entire war situation together. Ethan was the first to speak. He mentioned Elun's mysterious oracle and his mission for this trip. Malfurion frowned and recounted the scene of Tyrande being kidnapped. Ethan could hear the deep helplessness and pain in his voice. Every time Malfurion talked about this incident, the painful memories resurfaced. Under the influence of Sargeras's evil power, the Queen's chief minister, Xavius, had been completely corrupted and turned into a feared satyr. Despite this, he still resented Malfurion. In order to retaliate during a fierce battle between the two sides, he led his men in a surprise attack and successfully abducted the Moon Priestess Tyrande. However, the former chief advisor did not escape the punishment he deserved. Under the joint attack of Malfurion and other druids, Xavius once again fell at their feet. This time, Malfurion did not give him any chance to resurrect. He used an oak seed full of vitality and, with the help of a druid's natural spell, imprisoned Xavius forever in 10 immovable trees. Defeating Xavius again could not undo what had happened. The fact that Tyrande was kidnapped plunged Malfurion into deep anxiety. This archdruid, usually known for his calmness and wisdom, seemed to have become a different person, unable to conceal his inner panic. He even began to struggle to lead the druid sect calmly, causing a trace of chaos within the sect. This time, the demigod vanguard army disobeyed Jared's orders and marched toward the Burning Legion without permission, breaking the fragile balance that had been maintained. Jared's strategic layout had a significant impact, but the archdruid's subconscious connivance also played a role in promoting the incident. Malfurion realized this after the war. He had always been strict with himself, which made him feel very guilty for his lapse in judgment. He understood that he was no longer the solitary figure he once was. As a druid, he was no longer the apprentice who happily followed Cenarius in the forest to learn the ways of nature. He had become a prominent figure among the night elves, and his actions and words now affected the fate of many. This time, his failure to control his personal emotions had implicated the entire army. He began to reflect on his behavior and sought a solution to the problem. Although there was still a love rivalry between Ethan and Malfurion, Ethan soon discovered that the archdruid was actually a very kind person. Additionally, Tyrande, who had caused their conflict, had been captured, making it easier for them to get along. Ethan began to try to have more in-depth communication with Malfurion, hoping to face the current predicament together. Malfurion was extremely obsessed with the power of nature, and this obsession made him interested in anything related to druid magic. Although he felt somewhat unhappy when he looked at Ethan's handsome face, he recognized Ethan's unique druid abilities and endured the discomfort to have a druid session with him. During their communication, Malfurion showed great patience with Ethan's questions about the druid spells of the Azeroth school and provided answers. However, Malfurion could not offer any suggestions regarding the mutated druid spell that Ethan had mastered. He admitted that he lacked knowledge in some aspects and hoped to learn Ethan's unique druid spells to better supplement Azeroth's druid system. Their exchange of intelligence came to an end, and the focus naturally shifted to their common concern, how to rescue the captured Tyrande. When discussing this topic, Malfurion frowned, clearly struggling internally. He was silent for a long time before letting out a long sigh, as if trying to release all the burdens in his heart. "This ambush made me deeply aware of my responsibility," Malfurion said with a solemn expression. "So, I have made up my mind that I will no longer personally participate in the rescue of Tyrande. Instead, I will do my best to assist Cenarius and become a bridge of communication between demigods and mortals." Upon hearing this, Ethan was immediately shocked. His eyes widened, and he asked in disbelief, "You mean the responsibility of rescuing Tyrande will fall entirely on my shoulders? Is that really appropriate?" There was an unspoken subtext in his heart that both rivals in love understood. "Are you so confident in letting me rescue her alone? Aren't you afraid that I will take the opportunity to take away everything you value?" "It is out of such considerations that I made this difficult decision," Malfurion said, his eyes flashing with determination. He slowly shook his head and continued, "Tyrande's safety has consumed too much of my energy and has begun to affect my judgment of the entire battle situation. I cannot continue like this." He sighed heavily and continued, "If I continue to live in this half-hearted state, not only will I be unable to fulfill my responsibilities, but I may also become a burden to the coalition forces. Therefore, I must make a change. Malfurion then pressed Ethan's shoulders heavily with both hands and stared at him with a burning gaze, as if placing all his expectations on the young druid. "Please, Ethan," he said sincerely. "I hope that you, as a fellow member of the Moon Goddess, can rescue Tyrande on my behalf. During this period, I will do everything in my power to assist Cenarius and support our cause. I will do my best to attract the attention of the Burning Legion and create the best conditions for your strike team to infiltrate Aislinn. I believe you will be able to successfully rescue her." "Is there really such an operation?" Ethan couldn't help but show deep admiration in his eyes upon hearing Malfurion's decision. This kind of operation was truly beyond his expectations. He stared at the Archdruid in front of him and sighed inwardly. What is the difference between this and directly handing Tyrande into his hands? He never expected Malfurion to be so generous. A joking thought flashed through Ethan's mind, and he couldn't help but secretly curse. Could this Malfurion be an NTR lover? Does he have some special cuckold fetish? Thinking of this, his eyes couldn't help but fall on the emerald-green hair of the Archdruid. The bright color seemed to silently confirm his suspicion. However, joking aside, Ethan's deep admiration for Malfurion was genuine. For the sake of the overall situation and the greater good, Malfurion could resolutely give up his personal emotions. This spirit made Ethan feel ashamed. He asked himself if he could make the same choice, and he doubted it. But that doesn't mean Ethan will back down or give in. Now that Malfurion has made such a decision and entrusted Tyrande with this important responsibility, Ethan will naturally shoulder this responsibility without hesitation. Not only the responsibility of saving her, but also the responsibility of fighting alongside her. Chapter 718, Garnier's Branch. "You don't need to tell me about rescuing Tyrande. I will work hard." Ethan nodded solemnly. He then explained, "However, I do not intend to lead others with me when I infiltrate Aislinn this time." Seeing Malfurion's surprised expression, Ethan further elaborated, "You may already know that I have many unique druid spells. These spells can play a huge role in infiltration operations, but other druids are not proficient in these skills. If I take them with me, not only will they be unable to provide much assistance, but they may become a burden and hinder my actions at critical moments." This was a sound statement, and Malfurion could not refute it. In fact, there was another reason in Ethan's mind that he had not spoken out. He hoped to enjoy the process of saving Tyrande by himself, and did not want to be disturbed by others. One advantage of coming from modern society is that he understands certain emotional routines better than natives like Malfurion. For example, he knew about the suspension bridge effect in psychology, which describes how people in stressful, exciting, or dangerous environments, such as crossing a suspension bridge, may experience physiological reactions like accelerated heartbeats. If they happen to meet another person at this time, they might mistakenly interpret this physiological reaction as a feeling of love. Therefore, he did not want a lot of light bulbs getting in the way at the critical moment when his relationship with Tyrande was heating up. He looked forward to spending an unforgettable time with Tyrande during the rescue, deepening their relationship. But Malfurion frowned, a tangled and worried look on his face. "Have you really decided to go alone? This is not child's play. If the devil finds out, your situation may be very dangerous." After hearing this, Ethan smiled calmly, his face filled with confidence and determination. "Don't worry, just leave this task to me. I firmly believe that Elune will not give me a task that has no chance of success. She must have seen some key factors that we cannot yet understand. For example, the attitude of Dath Remar Sunstrider," Ethan thought to himself. Although he was unable to reveal too much information to Malfurion due to his identity as a time traveler and related confidentiality principles, he speculated that the reason Malfurion in the original story was able to plan the infiltration of Aislinn and escape from it might be closely related to the upper elf named Dathramar Sunstrider. This speculation was not groundless, but had been verified in the history he was familiar with. Speaking of the name Dathramar Sunstrider, it was particularly unique and prominent in the Night Elf Society, where the moon is a sacred symbol. not only because of the surname Sunstrider, which seemed unusual under the protection of the moonlight, but also because of the dignity and glory behind this surname, the identity of the upper-class Jinglu clan. For a traveler from another time and space like Ethan, the surname Sunstrider was a resounding sign that no one could ignore. This surname, in the years to come, would be closely connected with Quel'Thalas, a glorious kingdom of high elves, and become the royal symbol of that kingdom. Of course, Quel'Thalas at this moment was just an ungerminated seed in the dust of history, waiting to be watered and cultivated by its founder, Dathramar Sunstrider. And this future king was still just an upper elf rising to prominence in night elf society. Every choice and action he made could affect the fate of Ezelyn and even the entire night elf community. Although Malfurion was deeply worried about Ethan's decision to set off alone, in the face of Ethan's ironclad attitude and seemingly impeccable explanation, Malfurion found himself unable to argue further. Ethan, who has a gentle personality and is not good at arguing with others, found it difficult to find a strong rebuttal. After some inner struggle, he finally chose to compromise and reluctantly agreed to Kaiwen's quest. However, before leaving, he specially prepared an extremely precious gift for Ethan to express his deep care and expectations for the young druid, hoping that Ethan could successfully rescue Tyrande. Malfurion, not being a time traveler, didn't know that Tyrande was protected by the moon god and was in good condition. In his eyes, Tyrande was in danger, and every second counted in saving her. Malfurion stretched out his hand and handed a seemingly ordinary branch to Ethan. Ethan was a little confused at first, but the moment his fingers touched the branch, he immediately felt the powerful force of nature contained within it. This power poured into his body like a trickle, elevating his ability to cast natural spells to a new level. Malfurion, is this root? Ethan raised his head in shock, staring at Malfurion, his lips slightly parted as if he wanted to say something. Malfurion smiled and nodded, saying softly, "Yes, this is a twig from Garnier, the mother tree. Yesterday, I specially prayed to Aviana, and when she learned that it was to be given to you, she spread her wings without hesitation and flew to Mount Hyjal. Early this morning, she returned with this freshly picked twig." Garnier, the mother tree, is a giant tree growing on the top of Mount Hyjal. Its branches and leaves not only stretch out in the material world, but also have a part of the projection in the Emerald Dream, like a bridge spanning reality and dreams. Druids often pass through this bridge and use the power of the mother tree to enter the psychedelic and profound Emerald Dream. Legend has it that all plants on the continent of Azeroth originated from this towering mother tree. Coexisting with it is Aviana, the demigod of birds. There is a unique connection between her and the Garnier tree, making her the only person besides the Titan guardian Freya who is qualified to pluck branches and leaves from this sacred tree. When Malfurion handed this twig full of vitality to Ethan, the heavy friendship made Ethan feel indescribably moved. He knew very well that even with Aviana's lightning speed, it was not easy to travel between Mount Hyjal and Isolin in one day, and it would require Aviana's strength. What's more, during this long journey, there was always the danger of being intercepted by demons. However, the demigod Aviana still worked tirelessly to complete the mission, which is undoubtedly the best representation of Ethan's outstanding courage and performance in the face of crises in the past. This precious gift is not just a branch, it represents the trust of the druids and the favor of the demigods. In fact, Aviana's help to Ethan goes far beyond that. Even earlier, Ethan had received blessings from this demigod and from another great demigod, Cenarius. These blessings gave him 2 additional powerful wild transformations, Stormcrow and Tree of Life. The transformation of Stormcrow allows Ethan to transform into a raptor with both speed and combat power, soaring in the sky as fast as the wind and unstoppable. The transformation of the Tree of Life allows him to enhance the healing spells and plant druid spells he can cast after the transformation, significantly improving the effects of these spells and making him like a moving source of life. Ethan's previous strategy of everything and every tree is a soldier has indeed been of great help to the demigods. His wisdom and courage won their respect and recognition. Otherwise, even if other mortals prayed with all their strength, it would be difficult to obtain such generous help from Aviana. Thank you, Archdruid. At this moment, Ethan held the rough staff prototype in his hands, feeling the weight of the responsibility and the trust placed upon him. Ethan clasped Malfurion's hand tightly, nodding solemnly. Please convey my deepest gratitude to Miss Aviana on my behalf. I will do everything in my power to rescue Queen Taran from danger. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Just maintain a peaceful mind, Malfurion said with a comforting smile, patting Ethan's arm. As you mentioned before, I believe that the goddess Elune would not assign you a mission without a chance of success. As long as you can find the key to solving this dilemma, the rescue operation will be more effective. In the coming days, we will launch multiple feint attacks against the devil to draw their attention. You must be extremely cautious when sneaking into Aislinn alone. Ethan's original weapon was a fairy silver wand he had crafted himself, his former right-hand tool. However, on the continent of Azeroth, such weapons were no longer useful. The spellcasters here, whether mages or druids, were accustomed to using staffs as their medium to shape and control nature. But Ethan didn't simply follow the crowd. He didn't choose to conform to the norm. For someone like him, an ordinary staff was almost insignificant. Although it could enhance natural magic to some extent, the improvement was negligible compared to the twig of Garnier he now held. Though the twig was still uncarved and retained its most original appearance, Ethan felt its power the moment he touched it. Just by carrying it, he could sense an increase in his natural affinity, a significant improvement in the casting speed of druid spells, enhanced spell power, and greatly reduced consumption. This kind of enhancement far surpassed what ordinary staffs could offer. As Ethan transformed into a stormcrow, flying high into the air and gradually disappearing into the sky as a small black dot on the distant horizon, Malfurion slowly withdrew his gaze. He prayed silently in his heart. Ethan, the important task of rescuing Tyrande is entrusted to you. May Elune's protection be with you and guide you to victory. Chapter 719. Where did Illidan go? In order to avoid the heavily guarded front lines manned by demons, Ethan set out from the vanguard camp and embarked on a tortuous detour. He spread his wings and soared, not stopping for 3 consecutive days and nights, until he reached the border between the northern territory of Zandalari and Nazmir. Then he adjusted his direction and resolutely advanced northward. Although this journey was full of hardships, he successfully bypassed the ironclad defense line set up by the Burning Legion east of Zin Azalin. Compared to the war-torn main battlefield to the east, the south and west directions of Zin Azalin appeared relatively calm. Although there were defenders stationed there, they were mainly the Moonguard troops deployed by the Upper Elves themselves, and traces of demons were almost impossible to find. Most of these Moonguards gathered around the city gate, and Ethan flew all the way to the outskirts of the city of Zin Azalin without encountering any form of obstruction or questioning. He landed steadily on the branch of a majestic ancient tree, maintaining the graceful posture of a flying eagle. When he looked over the city with his sharp eyes, he discovered a thorny problem. A layer of vague lavender light covered the entire city of Zin Azalin like a veil. This was obviously a defensive barrier, and its existence made Ethan's next actions extremely difficult. This is going to be a bit troublesome, Ethan thought to himself, frowning slightly. How can I sneak into the city without triggering Zin Azalin's defenses? In the Dark Knight Empire, where the arcane civilization flourished, the ancient and primitive methods of guarding the city gates and distinguishing the identity of those who entered the city with the naked eye had long been eliminated. Instead, the Upper Elves, led by Xavius, used the endless energy of the Well of Eternity to carefully construct a huge magical barrier. According to the rules of the Dungeons and Dragons world that Ethan had heard about, the real scientific name of this kind of enchantment is Mystery Lock. Mystery locks themselves have simple consciousness and are given the task of protecting cities or holy places by their creators. Their lifespans can last for hundreds or even thousands of years. The literal meaning of a barrier is a protective cover, but the function of Mystery Lock is more than that. The design purposes of Mystery Lock include, but are not limited to, protecting certain creatures within its range, expelling certain creatures, and detecting creatures within its range. Its operating principle is to infuse a huge field with a constant series of spells. Each mystery lock also has some unique abilities that cannot be directly described by spells. Xynosalin's mystery lock function includes detecting every creature that attempts to enter the city. Whenever an unqualified person rashly approaches the edge of the barrier, its built-in early warning mechanism will be activated instantly, and a piercing siren will echo over the entire city, announcing the arrival of the intruder. It is worth mentioning that the detection capabilities of this magic system are not limited to humans. It can even see through the camouflage of druids changing into animal forms, thereby completely eliminating the possibility of them trying to sneak into the city. Regarding this crucial information, Ethan had already learned from Malfurion and Jared before setting off. Their detailed descriptions gave him a deeper understanding of the city's defense system and allowed him to formulate countermeasures in advance. However, although the existence of the magic barrier made the city's defense seem impeccable, a certain number of elite soldiers were still stationed at the city gate. After all, although the barrier is powerful and has simple intelligence, it is still an inanimate object and lacks the adaptability of living beings. The unique flexibility of humans is evident in the existence of these soldiers, whose purpose is to handle potential emergencies and ensure the absolute safety of the entire city. At this moment, in front of the gate of Iceland City, a bleak and desolate scene unfolded. Years of war and turmoil had rendered this once prosperous city deserted, with people avoiding it, unwilling to get involved easily. Occasionally, a few merchants would come, hurrying through the city gates with nervous and solemn expressions. Ethan noticed that as soon as they stepped into the barrier, a subtle white light would flash across their bodies, as if the barrier was performing some mysterious verification of their identities. He observed all this quietly, thoughts racing through his mind. Suddenly, an idea flashed through his mind, and a meaningful smile appeared on his lips. He thought of a person, an internal agent in Iceland City. This traitor was none other than the other of the two victims of his Nenner, Malfurion's younger brother, Illidan. After Ethan left the military camp to look for reinforcements, Illidan soon mysteriously disappeared and was mistakenly thought to be dead. However, Ethan knew that Illidan had not disappeared, but had chosen another path. In the previous protracted war, Illidan had deeply realized one thing: mages have limits. So he made an astonishing decision. He stopped being a mage. In pursuit of unparalleled power, Illidan made an astonishing choice. He decided to throw himself into the arms of the Burning Legion. To this end, he did not hesitate to sacrifice his own eyes in exchange for absorbing the power of evil energy from the dark titan Sargeras. In this way, he became the world's first demon hunter, a lonely war king walking on the edge of darkness and light. However, from the title Demon Hunter, Ethan could glimpse Illidan's true inner thoughts. His betrayal was not out of sincere surrender, but because he wanted to go deep behind enemy lines, gain insight into all the secrets of the Burning Legion, and find a way to completely destroy this evil force. In other words, he was an undercover agent, a mole lurking in the heart of the enemy. After all, as a devoted admirer, Illidan always cared about his goddess Tyrande. As long as Tyrande continued to resist and fight against Queen Ashara, there was no way Illidan could truly betray his fellow Night Elves. Of course, the Burning Legion was not that easy to fool. They would not easily believe in Illidan's surrender, nor would they allow him to rise to the top and directly join the core ranks. Even if he was favored by Sargeras himself, Illidan had to prove his loyalty and worth by completing a series of arduous field tasks as a certificate of surrender to the Burning Legion. And that's exactly the opportunity Ethan wanted to take advantage of. He was well aware of Illidan's situation and thoughts, and understood that the Demon Hunter had a unique position within the Burning Legion, which he could exploit. In the lonely night, Ethan quietly activated the prophecy spell, Advanced Detection. At this moment, he no longer needed to hide the fact that he knew magic. All his attention was focused on finding that important person. Advanced Detection was not a simple spell. To be accurate enough, It required the caster not only to have excellent spellcasting skills, but also to have an in-depth understanding of the detection target. The better the caster knew about the detection target, the better the effect would be. At the same time, the closer the causal relationship between the spellcaster and the detection target, the stronger the effect would be. To further enhance the effect of the spell, Ethan had specially prepared items that Illidan had used. These items contained Illidan's breath and could be used as important props for casting spells. During the complicated ritual, Ethan felt the power of the spell gradually condense. Finally, from a perspective that only he could see, an invisible beam penetrated the layers of fog and shot forward. Into the distance, Ethan accurately locked onto Illidan's position. Over the next 2 days, Ethan did not act rashly. He patiently monitored Illidan's every move and gradually discerned the pattern of his activities. He discovered that Illidan would always set off from a specific city gate in Iceland at a fixed time to carry out his field missions. Ethan decided it was time to take action. He spread his wings and flew high, crossing the vast expanse of Iceland, heading straight for the south gate, where Illidan had been frequenting recently. Iceland was so large that if Illidan had to go out to work, he couldn't run in all directions. For convenience, he would always choose a fixed direction. Soon, Ethan arrived at his destination. Recent detection showed that Illidan had another field mission and was on his way back to Iceland. Ethan immediately decided to stay in a forest near the city gate to intercept Illidan on his only route. To ensure his actions were foolproof, he cast 2 spells: Control Animals and Control Plants, supplemented by the ability of Ask Nature. Instantly, he mobilized the animals and plants within a few miles, making them his spies to monitor the surroundings. Ethan himself lightly jumped onto the top of an ancient tree a little distance from the city gate, quietly observing the activities below like a vigilant eagle. Druid spells have unique advantages in investigation. These spells can harness the power of nature, allowing Ethan to understand the surrounding environment thoroughly. However, he knew that although these spells were powerful, they could not compare with the accuracy of magical alchemical products, such as the mystical eye. While animals and plants could provide him with certain information, their intelligence was limited, and they were not capable of overly complex investigation tasks. In contrast, the mystical eye was like a drone with a high-definition camera, capable of transmitting clear images in real time and providing more intuitive and comprehensive intelligence. Unfortunately, the Azeroth he was in now was far from the world of Harry Potter, and he could not summon the demon pet Iwu or the artificial maid from that world to assist him. If he were in that world, he might be able to handle the situation more easily. But even so, he still had to make full use of the resources at hand. Chapter 7:20. Traitor or Traitor. The night was dark, and it was approaching early morning. Ethan Quia suddenly noticed movement in his carefully arranged surveillance network. Several trees connected to his mind sent weak fluctuations, indicating the approach of a group of people, including an elf whose characteristics matched those Ethan had described. This was the first time Ethan had received such a precise alert. His long wait had often been in vain, as his loyal animal and plant monitors frequently misidentified their targets. This was understandable, given their limited intelligence. Differentiating between demons and night elves who used evil energy was already their limit. However, when Ethan quickly flew across the night sky to the area where the signal was sent, he let out a long breath. This time, he finally saw the target he had been waiting for. On the forest path, a night elf man with a naked upper body was walking slowly forward. His body was engraved with numerous evil demonic patterns, which shone eerily in the night. Although a piece of cloth covered his eyes, Ethan could still recognize the familiar face from its unique outline. With such a distinctive look, who else could it be but Illidan? Illidan was not alone. He was followed by a team composed of night elves and demons. They moved with vigorous steps and alert expressions, clearly Illidan's subordinates. They were also responsible for monitoring him, a heavy responsibility. In the center of the team, 2 or 3 night elves stood out. They were covered in scars and tied tightly with rough ropes, appearing to be prisoners they had captured. Ethan knew that under such circumstances, he would not be able to communicate with Illidan face to face. If his subordinates were alerted, he might have to take extreme measures, such as killing to silence them. Handling it this way would only deepen Illidan's doubts and difficulties within the Burning Legion, which would be detrimental to his infiltration plan. So Ethan chose to talk to him in another way, using the method he was most familiar with and best at. Illidan, who had just completed a clearing mission, was leading his men back to the city to rest. As they marched along, everyone in the team was silent. The demons naturally had nothing to say to the Night Elves, and the Night Elves' subordinates, even if the boss didn't speak, found it easy to remain silent. Illidan appeared cold on the surface, but his heart was not as calm as it seemed. Along the way, his thoughts were always occupied by the scene from the previous night. The image of the Night Elf falling under his two blades lingered like a nightmare. Whenever he tried to close his eyes, even though this was now an action he was unable to do, the eyes of those sentries looking him as if he were a traitor would flash in his mind. These eyes, full of anger and confusion, were like sharp arrows, piercing deeply into his heart and causing him to suffer. He silently asked himself, how long will this kind of life last? Every time he performed a mission, he felt a heavy sense of guilt. Although he kept comforting himself that these were necessary sacrifices and the price that had to be paid for the greater goal, he still couldn't let go. As more and more missions were performed, Illidan's desire to find a way to completely destroy the portal and prevent the Burning Legion from continuing to send troops became increasingly intense. Only in this way could he and his compatriots be truly relieved. Just when Illidan was immersed in his own thoughts, a familiar voice suddenly sounded deep in his heart, as if a long-lost old friend was whispering in his ear. Night Superman, open your eyes. I am Ethan Quaye. Illidan could hear the mischievous tone in these words, which made him subconsciously alert. At first, he felt that this was another demon testing him, just like Sargeras did before granting him power, so he was no stranger to such temptations. However, Illidan quickly dismissed this idea. There is no mistake, the presence that touches this soul, that familiar feeling that goes deep into the bone marrow, is Ethan Quaye. Illidan instantly recalled his experience with Ethan in locating the Well of Eternity through soul traveling together. That experience made him very familiar with Ethan's psychic power. Illidan knew that his eyes might deceive him and his senses might be misled, but the communication between heart and soul would never lie. This familiar and unique spiritual power could not be successfully imitated by anyone. So, he immediately adjusted his emotions, kept calm, and continued to move forward without revealing any flaws, as if everything was normal. Yet, deep down in his heart, he was having a conversation with Ethan. Ethan Quaye, it's you. Why are you here? Illidan asked in confusion. Then a wry smile appeared on his lips, and he continued, Are you here to judge me, a traitor? Being an undercover agent put Illidan under heavy psychological pressure. At this moment, he was eager to find someone to talk to, even if this person was his love rival. I actually don't want things to develop to this point. Before Ethan could respond, Illidan started talking to himself. Perhaps you can listen to my experience first, make a judgment again. However, Ethan did not have the patience to listen to a man's complaints and difficulties. Stop talking nonsense, he interrupted Illidan's confession with the power of his mind. I am pressed for time and need you to do me a favor. Then, he revealed the purpose of his trip. I want you to help me sneak into Aesilon and rescue Tyrande. In order to prevent Illidan from continuing to indulge in his own emotional entanglements, Ethan directly stated his intentions and hoped to get his help as soon as possible. Sure enough, upon hearing the name Tyrande, Illidan's Jade Syndrome was almost completely cured immediately, and his original decadence and self-pity were swept away. He eagerly asked Ethan, What is going on? Tyrande. When was she arrested? How come I didn't know anything about this? Where is she being held now? Is she okay? The 5 questions he asked in a row showed his deep worry and concern for the priestess. Seeing that the demon hunter in front of him was so disturbed by the information he revealed that he could hardly control his expression and exposed his flaws in front of others, Ethan hurriedly comforted him. Regarding your first 4 questions, I can't give you a clear answer now, but at least I can tell you that Tyrande is currently in a relatively safe environment. As the daughter of a loon, she has always been protected by the goddess. Although she was imprisoned by the enemy, her life is not in danger. In order to enhance Illidan's trust, Ethan added, "This is an oracle sent by the goddess Elune herself, so you can rest assured." Ethan's words calmed Illidan's inner turmoil and stabilized his mind. When Maiev endorsed Ethan's identity as God's favorite, Illidan had already defected, so he was unaware of Ethan's identity and had no idea about the so-called oracle. There were also doubts about its authenticity. However, when he recalled the past time spent with Tyrande, Illidan could detect that Elune's special preference for Tyrande was different from that of other priests, so he believed Ethan's words. Knowing that Tyrande was temporarily safe, Illidan's tense nerves relaxed a little. It can be seen that Illidan, who has seen the power of Sargeras, understands the horror of the Burning Legion better than others. Even with the blessing of the gods, leaving Tyrande in the enemy's base camp is still too risky. So, Illidan said without hesitation, "Since you are here to rescue Tyrande, please tell me how I can help you." Great. Ethan was very satisfied with the other party's decisiveness and then informed Illidan of the first part of his plan. "Generally speaking, your first task is to help me sneak into the city gate. I will contact you again after I find a safe place to stay." After speaking, Ethan cut off the psychic communication with Illidan, leaving him where he was, and departed directly.